that I told my sister, so I brought her with me because I wanted to stay with my sister.
Oh,
Sweet. And then she'll stay for 3 weeks with my sister.
Morning. Morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to welcome you on this, our second day of the 69th GEF Trust Fund Council meeting. And today we start the day with the agenda item number 7, that is the agenda item with regards to relationship with the conventions. As you can all see, we have something prepared which is different to what we normally do. As a matter of fact, I put my tie as a TV host of a game show to really put things into context, because we at the Secretariat feel that we underutilize the presence, the physical presence, and the online presence of the head of the conventions. They come here, they give us a report, and we got a relatively formal exchange. And I want that exchange is a formal exchange to bring more substance. And this is why I thought that we, for a change, can start what I call the Executive Secretaries Series. This is season 1, by the way.
where's Netflix?
Season 1, by the way. And make the best out of having them. By the way, they will be submitting their report formally to the Secretariat, and it will be available for everyone here at the Council. So without any ado, I'll go through one question. Please, takes a couple of minutes for those questions. And then I'll go over again with the second question. And then I will try to, the plan is to give as much time as possible to council members and alternates to really complement and use the opportunity of having all of them here. Also, I would like to thank those who are joining us remotely. Thank you so much. So to begin with, let me go backtrack. We had in the last 6 months, four COPs. And it's extremely important that now that we have the head of the conventions to go a little bit through what happened in those COPs and what is relevant for us, GEF Council, in terms of our businesses associated to GEF 8 and also, very importantly, associated to the next replenishment. So my first question to Rolf, Simon, Jibin, Andrea, but I see that we got, yes, hi Ms. Baker, and Monica. Then I'll go with Vladimir, and last but not least, with Yvonne. So, Rolf, we all went. Oh, yeah. We all went very recently to Geneva to the BRS COP. Can you give us your take, or what were the relevant topics that are important for this council and the next replenishment?
Thank you very much, Carlos Manuel, and thank you so much for inviting me to speak with you this morning. I hope it will be a conversation that we can engage in. And to be honest with you, I'm not going to go into those chemicals because otherwise probably, it will be a revival of the COPs. But there were 3 important observations for me sitting in the chair as Executive Secretary. First one is multilateralism is strong and active, and I saw it because I run 3 conventions, and the passion that those delegates had in negotiating for things that were so important to the economy. I mean, here we're talking about one, for example, an amendment to a chemical which had a 3 billion interest So really, those parties sat through the nights and negotiated and come out with an answer, showing that multilateralism works. That's my first point. And we can unpack this if we have time. The second point is that the conventions that we have today are not only operating at the global level, they have significant impacts down supply chains, value chains, not only multinational companies, but small companies, especially in the area of chemicals and waste. And also they go through the whole life cycle. And I saw this at play during our COPs when we were discussing and negotiating the listing of chemicals under the Stockholm Convention, but also the issue of waste and transboundary movement of waste, especially to do with the annexes under the convention, which attempts to provide clarity on the legal clarity on what we define as a waste and not a waste. And that, of course, has significant impacts on trade because all the three conventions are trade-related first. Secondly, they are legally binding, so the decisions taken are legally binding upon the parties. So the impact does not only impact all those big companies we talk about, but they also impact those people in the front line, those companies, the small and medium-sized companies, and even go as far as impacting national efforts as well. The third one, and that for me was important as well. Let me check my notes here. I just noted it down just to make sure. Yes, I had the honor of having 5 executive secretaries from the other conventions for the first time in our COPs. I don't know how I managed to convince the executive secretary of CBD, CITES, Ramsar, okay, Minimata is fine because we are in the same space, to attend my COP and for us to talk about what is the relationship between our convention. What's the relationship between pollution? What's the relationship with climate change? What's the relationship with wetlands and biodiversity? And the amount of exchange that we had and information that was shared with the parties were absolutely mind-blowing because we started to look at those interlinkages. And I've seen that happen here in the GEF Council, but to see it happen in my COPs where we discuss exclusively waste management, chemicals, and so on, and to have all these executive secretaries come together, and some of the delegates are probably the same that probably go to, especially from small islands and from small African countries where the capacity is not the same, then they go to all these COPs. It was really interesting to see the exchange there and to explore the linkages. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rolf. Now let me go backtrack to the next COP, which was UNCCD. Luis, the same question of Rolf. We had a very interesting COP in Riyadh, many important topics, definitely the drought element and the funding needed to narrow domestic and global gaps were relevant topics, but it will be great, and I'll do the same question that I did to Rolf. What are the takeaways, messages, and ideas that came out of the COP that are extremely relevant for the GEF replenishment? You were with us in Paris last week, so I think that's a very easy question to you, Luis.
Thanks, Carlos Manuel. And Andrea apologizes, she's in transit and will hope to join us even later on in this session. Yeah, Saudi Arabia was very exciting. There were lots of positive developments, still some contentious. You certainly touched on the point around drought. The parallel financing pledges for drought that were announced at COP in Riyadh, I think are really interesting. And for the GEF Council, looking at how we can leverage those, I think would be really important. The financial needs assessment, as you mentioned, was released at the COP16 in Riyadh, and it requires a lot of investment into this area, around $1 billion a day. So we aren't expecting GEF to fill that, and we recognise that the public sector is not going to get there. I think it was clear from the discussions that it can only be reached if we really look at changing the economic investment model. So I would say perhaps a couple of the things that were really in that kind of discussion and that sense of direction were the link between land and food systems and food security and agricultural production, and including livestock production in the rangelands, and the role of the private sector in going to scale. So those were definitely linked to the conversations around impact for environmental issues and the ability to get to the size that we need to get to. We have, I think, a lot of work done already for the COP coming up in 2026 in Ulaanbaatar, and we're expecting a big focus on rangelands and grasslands, and the potential to deliver around multiple benefits. So the health of the rangelands, the health of the livestock, and the health of the people at the same time, as well as the sort of social and economic benefits. And I think at the next COP, we'll also be looking at what happens next. So our kind of 10-year framework comes to an end in 2028. So I think it will be a visionary COP next year as well. And I think all of the parties to UNCCD really see GEF as an absolutely vital partner in delivering on that. So I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Luis, for that. Let me now pass it over to Simon, and let's talk, Simon, a little bit about the outcomes of Baku. We were very much interested, GEF Council and, of course, the GEF Secretariat on the report, on the financial report of the steering committee. I never remember the right name, where it reported that the Global North was able to fulfill their commitment for the $100 billion. As a matter of fact, the report talks about 115, but it rose a lot of questions within parties. Who's channeling and mobilizing those resources, who's putting the resources, who's receiving the resources. And also the G20 was able to contribute into that discussion by presenting a report of the effectiveness of the climate funds that responds to the convention. By the way, the climate funds only mobilize 2.9% of what is mobilized as climate finance on an annual base. Give us your take, Simon, please, on where we are. What are the challenges, and being the GEF, the first fund, climate funds within your convention that will be replenishment in the context of the financial decisions that are taken in Baku? Over to you, Simon.
Okay, thank you, Carlos Manuel. It's great to be here virtually with you and everyone there. I want to start off from where Rolf left off, which is really, really important. And what we saw in Baku, as challenging as it was, is that multilateralism is still alive. We all know the geopolitical headwinds that were difficult last year. This year, even more difficult, but we were able to leave Baku with a crucial decision on the new collective climate goal for finance. We all know that finance is singly the most contentious, the most inflamed of all negotiating items in all of our conventions. And success there, progress there, speaks to the levels of ambition and implementation we're able to achieve. So leaving Baku with an agreement to triple that goal, as insufficient as that number is, 300 billion, as insufficient as it is to meet the demands of developing countries, it is significant progress in terms of tripling that number. We also left Baku with a commitment to develop a roadmap, the Baku to Belém roadmap, the roadmap to $1.3 trillion per year by 2035, which speaks to the scaling up and recognition of the scale of finance that is required. But as you were referring to, Carlos, on the SCF, the Standing Committee on Finance, I think one of the key challenges for us, opportunities moving forward, is how we can learn lessons from the past, learning lessons from the original goal of 100 billion. That became a very divisive goal. We have to recognize that that target was met, but how it was met, I think there are many lessons for us to take away, and how we apply those lessons to the delivery of the 300 billion per year by 2035, and then that scaling up with innovative sources of finance to that 1.3 trillion. So difficult times. What was achieved was hard fought by. But in these difficult times, we have to find a way of how creative we can be. We know public purses are constrained, and this is precisely the environment you are in with the GEF 9 replenishment. We are all competing for resources from some of the same pockets of money. So I think how we work together, how we ensure there is new and additional, how we ensure that there is strong coordination between all of the funds, all of the funding that is available, that there is clarity on how those resources can result in the strongest possible impact for developing countries on the ground. Is a massive responsibility that we all carry, and how we work together in our specific spheres, but how we coordinate, work together, support each other, how we catalyze what each of us is doing with that single objective of having the greatest possible impact.
Thank you so much, Simon, for your words. Now let me move it over to Jibin from CBD. Same question, Jibin. We went through a difficult COP16. We even finished it in Rome on the 21st of February. So over to you, Jibin.
Thank you very much, Councilman Manuel. This is actually a very challenging question. We just received minutes ago before the meeting. And if you see my impression about our COP16, actually, from now on or many years later, what you ask me what I would still remember, I would still remember is there's a high-level pledging conference organized by your team, which actually see over 160 million donors pledged from generous donors to the GBO fund. And I always say it's really under-advertised in the process. It's a first good try, and with concrete results. So then back to your question, the core part, actually, the first part of the COP16, Executive Secretary Astrid already reported last time. I'm going to talk about the second part in February in Rome. The impression is that you can really, on the surface, you're talking about the financing, and you're talking about indicators. But if you go examine the true nature of the debate, actually, it's about the extent to which how the parties take seriously about the Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. So a strategic framework would not be complete without progress measurement. without financing, without institutions to deliver. So at the second part of the COP16, parties delivered on that. So we have a very good comprehensive monitoring framework adopted with a long list of indicators. And that's very, very, to me, it means a lot, because for so many years, with the CBD, we use different language, different terminologies, different way to measure progress. And even between CBD and the GEF, you see the GEF report, they have their own indicators, and we never able to come together. Now we have a global set of indicators. In a few years, if we implement it, we will see that, like in other economic statistics and other forums, we will be able to talk the same language. And financing, and that part, that's a huge decision actually. The financing part, one is about the strategy, one is about the focus on global environment facility. We have a long list of program priorities for your consideration at GEF9 replenishment. And also we concluded with effectiveness review. There are many issues identified and already taken up by the GEF9 directions documentation. But one thing is we see perhaps need to be enhanced in this documentation is that right now is still under development, is about the governance issue. For those who were in Rome and involved in a negotiation, you perhaps remember that was a key issue during the negotiation. And for financing strategy, we have a long debate on the designation of GEF as a permanent institutional structure to operate a financial mechanism under the convention. And the issue, we actually developed a work plan, a process to that end. Hopefully, in the next two meetings of conference parties, we will see very fruitful outcomes on that. And in terms of institutions, that area perhaps we are still under development. There was some, final adoption of a decision. There was some debate, and perhaps we are hopeful we work with the GEF secretary to elaborate that part better in the future. Thank you very
so
much.
Thank you so much, Jibin, and thanks for the support that the CBD Secretariat has gave us throughout the whole GBFF process. And let me now go to Monica, even though we haven't had your COP yet. We'll have it later this October. Same question, Monica, what are the things that you believe will come as relevant topics that should be a topic of discussion in the next GEF replenishment?
Thank you so much, Carlos Manuel, and good day, everyone. And thank you so much for imposing on us this new formula. My heart beats for this kind of discussions because we are all have had enough of presentations, making them and listening to them. So I will start with something in which I believe, and this is integration. This is probably because I spent many years of my professional career dealing with the marine environment, and I believe those involved in the marine environment protection are really at the front line of integration effort out of necessity. And our COP in the past has given guidance to the GEF to work more and make more efforts to integrate across focal areas. And I would say with my experience for the last couple of years with GEF, I can see how GEF is in this unique position of serving several MEAs. What does it mean is that the GEF Secretariat Council members, you have an insight into each and every MEA and to access to the really amazing knowledge. And I'm not aware of any other funding mechanism that has that. And I attended TAG meeting in February, and to be frank, that was one of the most interesting and fruitful meetings I've attended recently. So we would definitely like to see and encourage this integration to happen even more in GEF 9. But and then this all is about synergies and policy coherence, as you, Carlos Manuel, have been promoting, advocating for. And I would say really to achieve that, we have to be in sync, meaning it has to be paired with the integration effort by MEs, among MEs, and on a national level. And that will make it easier for GEF projects to really identify and track and report on co-benefits at the end. And we are doing that effort, as Rolf has mentioned. I would at the same time caution that under the pressure of doing more with less resources, we don't consider integration as a golden solution to everything. After all, GEF has been established as a financial mechanism to support core obligation of the parties. Now coming to our next COP, which will be in the beginning of November, I would say there will be discussions that are typical for COP. There will be guidance to the GEF. There will be a decision on the third terms of reference for the review of financial mechanism, expected to be concluded in 2027. But there are also other outcomes and decisions that are highly relevant, and they relate to the ongoing GEF processes and project. And give me one example, and I will finalize my answer for that question. We had received from one party submission on a party own compliance with one of the requirements of the convention, and that is to meet 2025 deadline to phase out mercury and mercury compounds in chloralkali industry. This is first such a submission to Implementation Compliance Committee. And this submission, I would assume, is based on the fact that the country is already being supported by the GEF project to phase out mercury in chloralkali industry. So the committee agreed on extended deadline. We will monitor how it's progressing. So there is a clear match how GEF works and how it supports compliance of the parties. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monica. With this, I conclude kind of the COP's reviews, and I'll pass it over to Vladimir. Vladimir, thank you so much for joining us today here. This is a great opportunity, Vladimir, to update the GEF Council with regards to where we are in the ratification and BBNJ. But most importantly, the Council will be very, very much interested to hear from you on what should be the areas of BBNJ programming that the GEF should be presenting in the next replenishment. We already have advanced in that field, but it will be great, Vladimir, if we can hear from you on where we are with the ratification process, the role that the GEF has played in supporting that ratification process. And now we need to look at the implementation of the convention in GEF. And GEF 9 will be the first GEF cycle that most probably, if the ratification is done of the convention, will be programming resources for the implementation of this new convention. Over to you, Vladimir. Thanks.
Thank you. Muchas gracias, Carlos Manuel. And I hope that my unicorn time will be appropriate for this series. Good morning, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start with the relatively good news. The current situation of the BBNJ agreement, and I would like to emphasize this is agreement about the biodiversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction, which covers both the high seas and the seabed and subsoil. Beyond national jurisdiction. So with regard to this agreement, we stand at 116 signatures at this morning, and 21 states and the European Union, including the European Union, have already expressed the final consent to be bound by this agreement. We are on track. There will be a treaty event next week, next Monday, on the 9th of June, in Nice, France, which will hopefully significantly increase the number of ratifications. I would dare to say that, to be very optimistic, there'll be a significant leap in the number of ratifications or approvals, and also there'll be additional signatures coming. So we are on a good track towards perhaps even the entry into force of this agreement this year, or if not this year, early next year. This is where we stand regarding the progress of states joining the agreement and the regime to be established by it. Now, regarding your second question, let me take it from this perspective. We are in the situation of alignment, and I would say there's a transition period still between the adoption and supporting the ratification process towards the implementation, which, as you know, will depend to a certain extent, or maybe to the large extent, on the decisions taken by the first conference of parties and subsequent conferences, COPs. So this is a period of alignments, of priorities. These are priorities already identified in the agreement, priorities yet to be identified in the discussions of the Preparatory Commission, and the Preparatory Commission had its first meeting this year in March, and there'll be another one in August. Priorities of the donor community in the context of the ninth replenishment. But on a positive note, we already do see a clear alignment, including during the latest replenishment meeting, of the objectives and contents of the agreement, from strengthening ecosystem resilience to stressors, including, for instance, those related to climate change and marine pollution, to the sustainable use and conservation of biodiversity, involvement of indigenous peoples and local communities, relevant stakeholders, private sector, and we also, I would like to mention the gender balance. Several of these identified priorities and directions for the future, which were addressed in Paris, are also embedded in the capacity building to be undertaken under the agreement. And the capacity building will be one of the major focuses of the present efforts under 8th replenishment, also under 9th replenishment, let me stress that. And the effectiveness of these priorities and directions will have to be reviewed periodically. I think under the agreement, and capacity will be always country-driven. We need for this effort to be transparent. We, of course, are aligned with the GEF priorities for efficiency, for a iterative process, participatory, cross-cutting issues, and then also gender responses, as I've already highlighted. And we, as our division and the legal council, as you know, we are functioning as the focal point for UN Oceans, which is a mechanism for cooperation, facilitating cooperation and coordination among the secretariats of the UN system and International Seabed Authority. So we are also trying to be conscious of the need to integrate, and the word integrations and synergies was already mentioned here, and to be guided by lessons learned and stimulate the interactions, efficiency, and maximize the donor funds. But as I said,
thank you so much.
Priority. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vladimir. And before I go to Yvonne, I need to go back to Simon, because Simon has to leave us very soon. Simon, can you give us an update on Baku to Belen? And also, I bet that Belen will be a lot of conversation on forest land use change. I wondered if you can also update us on 6.4, 6.2 as well. I think those are two relevant topics. And thanks for joining us, Simon. Over to you.
No, it's always a pleasure to be in your company, Carlos. I think the expectations for COP30 on the negotiation side, they will be less intense, and that is a very, very relative term, less intense than some of the previous COPs. The biggest single negotiating item. There are many areas still to be covered, but the major area is on adaptation, the global goal on adaptation, and agreement on the indicators, which will be very important for many of your members. So there is that, but the big focus is on NDCs and the delivery of this third generation of NDC, which is intended to address both on the ambition side, you know, how much closer are we to bending that emissions curve? And the target is to get to, well, by 2030 is a 43% reduction in emissions, and by 2035, a 60% reduction. So how close are we to that in terms of the ambition of NDCs? But secondly, how we close the implementation gap. And within that, as I was saying in my first intervention, the critical thing that unlocks both ambition and implementation is finance. So we are speaking of this next round of NDCs as investment plans, economic, social transformation plans. So taking a different slant, a much deeper approach to it than the previous two generations. And there, the outcome of Baku on NCQG on the 300 billion is a key enabler, but as we know, is underwhelming for many developing countries. But this is where the roadmap to 1.3 trillion fits in, and how being able to unlock finance, both public and private finance, and these innovative sources of finance, how that can be the enabler for implementation progress. Then you mentioned Article 6 coming out of Baku. We had finally had agreement on Article 6.4, 6.2. The focus now is on how that is operationalized. And that is where the focus on carbon markets are, and how with this regulated regime, we can bring some real integrity to carbon markets, and how we can unleash new sources of finance that will be enabler for emissions reductions for developed countries, but a valuable source of finance for developing countries. And then, sorry, just going back to adaptation, the second piece, national adaptation plans. So there is a call for all countries who are yet to submit their NAPs to do so by the time we get to Baku, to Beleng. So there is a heavy push on working with developing countries. GEF, GEF has an important role to play there, as does the GCF Adaptation Fund and other arms of our development system. But how can we accelerate the level of adaptation for developing countries? So that is really the main deliverables, of which, as I said, only a portion of that is negotiated. The Brazilian presidency has a very ambitious, a very creative approach to this COP, because there will be additional space based on the negotiated agenda to their vision is how do we reframe the narrative on the process on climate. It is an opportunity to reflect on the past 10 years since Paris, but also to look forward to the next 10 years What does that look like? And how do we join up the outcomes from COP28, which was the global stocktake, where parties agreed to transition away from all fossil fuels, the doubling, tripling of renewable energy efficiency, the agreement to halt deforestation. How do we build on that roadmap of course correction, build on the finance that came out of Baku, and how is that then reflected in the nationally determined action plans and commitments countries are willing to take for the next 10 years. So that allows for a significant amount of creativity, focus on people, focus on the economy, focus on nature. So it should, the outcome of Belém should be a culmination of progress made in the past at the previous two COPs. So big ambitions, big expectations in a very, very difficult period.
Thank you so much, Simon, for that. And on behalf of the GEF Council, I want to thank you to join us today. Looking forward to that process towards Belém and COP30. Muchas gracias, Simon. Thank you so much.
Gracias, my friend. Bye-bye.
Okay, now I would like to invite my dear friend Yvonne Higuero to give us some words. This is the first time that the head of CITES is attending a GEF Council meeting. There is no record of that before. Yvonne, so what is the importance for the GEF Council to have you over here, Yvonne? As a simple one to you.
I have to pay for my lunch, I guess. Yes, and thank you for being an innovator and inviting for the first time a convention that is not having the GEF as a financial mechanism, letting me sneak in through the back door and discuss how we benefit. And the reason why I should be here is to be able to speak about how CITES, despite not receiving benefits directly from GEF as a financial mechanism, is benefiting from many projects that are dealing with nature, that are dealing with wildlife conservation under GEF. And one of the most important examples that I can say right now, there's many projects, but one of the most important examples that I can mention right now is the Global Wildlife Program, that actually is assisting parties of CITES to be able to implement their obligations and meet and achieve their goals under CITES by ensuring that they have the appropriate national legislation concerning wildlife, that they have better enforcement capacity to deter and fight wildlife crime in their countries, to be able to work at the national level with the local communities who are really at the front line of wildlife conservation and conservation of habitats, so that their livelihoods are protected and they find ways in which they can benefit from wildlife around them. And I want to point out that when we talk about wildlife under CITES, we talk about both flora and fauna. Now, the wildlife program has a big focus on animals, but I think now, and one of the questions you have asked is what has happened in the conventions of the COPs of the conventions that are here as part of GEF. But I can say, for example, and let me just mention also, with your disruption, you were also the first CEO of GEF who came to a COP of CITES in 2022 in Panama. And in that COP, we have yet again confirmed the increasing number of species, of marine species and timber species that are being added to the appendices of CITES. And these are economically valuable species that are being added to the CITES list, which is a real game changer, because now we have to work with industry, we have to work with those, with private sector, with those who are benefiting from wildlife. And I think GEF has a huge role to play here with bringing in that private finance. You have developed now with others this rhino bond. And many of the countries are asking for innovative financing mechanisms. And here again, I think that GEF has a huge role to play to be able to find other all of us are talking about the needs of financing, but now those industries that are profiting and benefiting from the existence of wild animals and wild plants should also be participating in bringing financial resources to all of us. The other point that many have made here, why I think it's important for us to be here, is that integration. And I believe that with the GEF replenished, the GEF 9, we have to look more further into integration. And yes, Monica, you're right that there's some very specific things that have to be dealt with by each convention. But at the same time, these are international obligations that the majority of who are sitting here have to meet for all of the conventions. So the more we can integrate and the more we can ensure that those projects are benefiting not only the conventions under GEF, but other conventions, is a benefit to those two countries. And finally, I would say the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework is one of those mechanisms that can integrate all of the conventions together. We have seen that with all of us here with chemicals, with all the biodiversity related conventions, with Ramsar Convention, not only UN conventions, with all of them. I just heard from my dear friend Vladimir Jaris about the BB&J. I think when we go to speak about all of the contributions that all of the different conventions are making and the organizations who are contributing to BB&J, we're about 30 who are doing this. We have to count all those contributions to be able to show progress. We have to be able to make sure that we can count that contribution that all of the different organizations and be this integrative platform. And I think that GEF can be that as well. Not only working at the international level, which we are doing very well, but working at the national level with the focal points of GEF, ensuring that they're not only working with those conventions who are that have GEF as a mechanism with the others and finding out what are those co-benefits, what are those other outcomes that we can have that have a much bigger impact. So I think that's the importance of conventions that are not covered by the GEF mechanism, to be able to attest that we are benefiting, the CITES parties are benefiting from all of these projects, but we have to do more to be more integrated, and especially under the KM-GBF, but also the national biodiversity strategies and action plans that also are trying to integrate better all of the different conventions.
Thank you so much, Yvonne, and thanks everyone for this first round. The second round, it will be 1 minute question to each one. Yeah, because I want to open the floor to Consul. But before that, let me remind Consul that this Consul is the one that allocates the largest funding for tropical forest conservation in planet Earth. This Consul takes decisions to allocate resources in marine conservation, being this Council the one that puts more financial resources in global marine conservation. This Council provides strategic funding for sustainable cities. So this Council is the Council that takes the decisions to mobilize the biggest amount of resources to developing countries in the sustainable cities. And I can say the same thing on the area of food systems and food systems change. And we need to recognize that element. We forget when we talk about, when I was hearing Simon talking about the halting and reverting the rate of deforestation, who is the one who has the main responsibility or all the resources to do that? It is this Council. And that is why this kind of interactive activities are so important. So let me go once more back to a 1 minute question to everyone else. I'll make one very nice for you, Yvonne, which is, I would like to know, as we enter the fourth quarter of GEF 8, I would like to know from each one of you, what are you really excited you saw it happen in GEF 8, and what we need to really improve from what you saw in GEF 8 towards GEF 9. Rolf, you got the floor.
Okay. I'm going to have 15 seconds for each of the points. Now, GEF 8 was important for us because some years ago, I sat down with colleagues and I said, look, we cannot have this piecemeal approach for the elimination of PCBs. The deadline is coming up. One deadline is already nearly past 2025, and the next one is in 2028. We need to have a more strategic approach to dealing with PCBs. In December last year, the GEF gave us our 50 million approved project. So thank you for this. But this was not possible without a 2 million grant from the European Union. And you know what we've done with it? We've transformed it into 200 million of private sector financing to eliminate PCBs. And here we're talking about thousands of tons. You can just imagine the health costs we'll be avoiding from removing this toxic oil from the environment. And as you know, this is not restricted within one country. It travels across borders, thousands of miles, and also lasts for decades in the environment. So for me, that's what I want to say to the GEF. This is very important. But I am not stopping here because I want to continue the journey. And this is where I'm coming to, back to the GEF now and saying, look, guys, GEF 9, we need to think strategically. And I think like a river. GEF is like a spring. It goes down the hillside, and other springs join and create that bigger river. So GEF has to see where it's going to be stimulating private sector investments. And everybody talks about billions, trillions, and whatnot, but I think GEF has an important role there to see where we unlock. And in my sector, pollution is a high risk area. Nobody wants to touch it. Nobody wants to touch a toxic barrel because it's, you have to handle it with special care. It'll be destroyed in a proper facility and we transport it properly. So for me to get investment in, we need this kind of risk reduction, risk guarantees. And we've seen it with the PCB, for example. And this also took many years to negotiate, is to get the energy sector on board. Because PCBs are used to transfer electricity from one point to the other, PCBs is found in transformers, and we have millions of these transformers around the world, guys, which we need to get rid of. And the only way we can get rid of is upgrade the grids. And luckily, there's huge, massive projects to upgrade the grids, because we need to upgrade the grids in order to achieve efficiency and solve climate change, for example, because with the efficiency of electricity, we can deliver better, but also we can solve the issue of renewable energy input into grids, because this needs special grids, right? And I will not go into the details, but I just want to show you. And also, millions of people now have small generators in the back of their homes, which is polluting them, so they're exposed to. So having better grids that do not fall during the middle of the night, or when the industry, or you switch on your welding machine, the whole town goes offline. So we're actually addressing multiple problems by joining together forces with the energy sector. I know you want to stop me, but I just want to say one more thing.
Okay.
We are going further. We are going further because we feel that there's huge opportunity to work with the private sector, not only in the energy sector, but also in the water sector. And there we'll be dealing with a big chemical, which, you know, the elephant in the room is PFAS. We've been using everywhere. Now we have this chemical from our clothes, from everything, and it's contaminated our waters, both in the global north and the global south. How do we clean this mess up? And that's going to take innovation, but also this kind of spring water that I'm looking at the GEF today, for us to mobilize the resources together with new development in water infrastructure, water technology, water treatment technologies, so that we can address this pollution issue. I have much more to say, but I'll stop here. Thank you.
Oh, you can say it later to Gonzo.
Okay.
And now let me turn it over to Luis. The same questions, Luis. What made you super excited in GEF 8 and what we need to improve for GEF 9?
Thanks, Carlos Manuel. I will try and stick to my minute. As ever, it'll be difficult. But I think what we were happy with in GEF 8 was the focus on the synergistic implementation. For our sector, this has worked very well and really has had good impact on the ground. And the kind of shift towards taking on board drought and drought planning has been positive for us. I think what we've also seen in GEF 8 is a move from the targeting land degradation neutrality and reporting on it into really planning action on the ground and decision support. So that kind of action-oriented approach has been really, really helpful. As we go forward into GEF 9, I think we would say target the most vulnerable. Ensure sort of the balanced representation of land and drought issues in the thematic allocations. So let's see where we're quite happy with the programming direction. We'd be hopeful that the money will follow. Continue supporting innovative financing mechanisms, including private sector, but particularly blended finance that generates co-benefits. And I think we need to kind of underline those co-benefits, environmental benefits, but all the sort of social benefits as well. And in the same way, sort of be creative and sort of take risks in this area. I think the benefits will accrue to the whole partnership if we do that. And for us, I think maybe supporting a more programmatic approach to enabling activities so that we can benefit from streamlining and gaining efficiencies in that area. But I think we're excited about GEF9 and think it's going in a very positive direction. So we're keen to continue a fabulous partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Luisa, so much. Vladimir, the same question to you.
Gracias, Carlos Manuel. Yes, what I'll limit myself to stating that our experience during the GEF8 has been extremely positive. We had a great cooperation with your team, Carlos Manuel, a great support towards the process of ratification of the agreement by the GEF, which is highly appreciated. There is nothing really that we would want to change in this, or on the contrary, we would like to enhance this excellent teamwork that we had with our GEF colleagues in the context of GEF9. As I said, this is now about the transition period, alignments of the priorities in the context of the outcomes of the preparatory commission first conference of the parties. We look forward to continue this excellent cooperation.
Thank you so much, Vladimir. Over to you, Monica.
Thank you so much. I would start by saying that this council meeting is a moment of celebration for Minamata Convention because of the work program you approved yesterday. And that's for two reasons. One is that we see a wider range of topics and obligations of the convention covered by GEF projects, but also something I mentioned in every council meeting, we need to address emissions from industry. And you have approved a major program to address mercury emissions from non-ferrous industry, which is Gemini project. There's also another project in Philippines related to mercury use in cement and construction material industry. It's very resource intensive. There are many co-benefits also for climate change. We're absolutely happy about it. And also one project on skin lightening products. I hope this is under your radar, as this is becoming a major issue in all continents, the use of mercury in cosmetics. This is over a multi-billion industry. Much of it, when it uses mercury, is really illegal. And this is a matter that really GEF projects address heads on. The second issue I would like to mention is that there is a still substantial amount of money left out of Minamata allocation and subject to further programming. So the next two rounds would be extremely important for the Minamata Convention. And my last point is about in GEF9, let's not wait towards the end of the replenishment period for programming for Minamata Convention. Our convention is very specific. There is a requirement and a deadline, and most of these deadlines are actually ending 2030. The only one for primary mercury mining is 2032 for majority of parties. So the next few years will be very critical for our convention. And as I always mention, this is one of the conventions that actually can be done and finished. It's not a framework convention that goes on. It is meant to be implemented with a reasonable period of time to make a space for another, maybe heavy metal convention. So that's what I count on for the GEF9. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'll pass it over to Jibin. The GEF in GEF8, we did a very nice combination in terms of the biodiversity focal area from the GEF Trust Fund, which is probably 40% of the GEF Trust Fund, plus GBFF. Altogether, we can say that 60% of the resources allocated from GEF8 are biodiversity or GBF relevant. So over to you, Jibin.
Thank you very much, Carlos. Yes, we at CBD Secretariat, we do acknowledge all the progress made by GEF and the GEF Secretariat. And that's why it's a very tough question for us to say which one is a good success story from GEF8. To me, one thing most impressed me is that new approach at the GEF to try to anticipate the issues, challenges, and then provide some solutions in advance. That's really helpful to the convention process. So you see the COP16, the Colombia presidency, labeled as a People's COP. And then it's the COP successfully adopted a number of decisions related to indigenous people, local communities, including establishing a subsidiary body. That's quite an achievement in terms of its self-organization there. But underneath that moment, actually, you can see, because the GEF already work on 20% allocation to indigenous people and local communities. People see that and then they want to make best use of it and then better organize themselves. So that's really helpful to a negotiation at CANI. And that's just one example. I'll give you another example. Before the adoption of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, you used the GEF7 resources already kickstart the preparation of MBSAP's new updating, always, and all series national biodiversity finance plans. So that's like really helped the CBD negotiation and advance implementation. Of course, and there is also point to the area you ask about what can be carried into GEF9, where can be improved. And we have read 25 submissions of MBSAPs from receiving countries. What we want to say is that these MBSAPs coming together with some financing plan, costing, and that's the area was missing in the past. So we wanted that, but unfortunately with all this, we need to got all the results come together. That's the one thing we want to suggest for your consideration.
Thank you, Jibin, for that last message, and you're preparing for a future consult agenda item of this consult that has to do with biofilm. We will be talking about it. So thanks, everyone. Final question to Yvonne. Yvonne, as we see what the countries are bringing to us as projects and ideas related to nature conservation, I feel that countries has quite low the investment to achieve the 30%. I look at the GEF, and the GEF information is a good thermometer to really understand what are the priorities of the country. The 30% is coming relatively slow. Nevertheless, there's a lot of concentration on achieving the 30% without recognizing that what we already have protected are still paper parks. As a matter of fact, I will be promoting the creation of a global map of protected, unprotected areas. I'll repeat it, a map of protected, unprotected areas, so we can really understand the level of challenge that means protecting biodiversity, because it's not just extending to 30%, it's doing good management of protected area. And this is where you guys are always working in the front line of the different problems associated to nature conservation. And I see that the countries and the GEF financing are going longer and longer with the basic support for increased management of protected areas. The work with park rangers using the highest technology. I mean, I came to this organization and my staff was saying, we cannot provide funding to buy cars, boats, and equipment for rangers. So how come are we gonna do the work? So can you give us your opinion of what the GEF should be improving with regards to one key element that has to do with improved management of protected areas?
Thanks. That's an excellent question, especially because we have a big program called the Monitoring the Illegal Killing of Elephants, where we work directly on protected area sites with rangers. And I think the problem that we have seen is that there is little investment in those protected areas where rangers are living under very difficult conditions. The housing is terrible. They don't have the tools that they need to be able to have proper enforcement. And as you say, cars, boats, etc. We have been able to provide that through the funding that the European Union has been giving us, but it's still not enough. I think what we need to do is encourage, we have to be able to work with the governments that this should not be the lowest priority in their own budgets. This somehow the GEF, yes, with financing and assisting with the financing, but being able to elevate that nature protection, the protection of these areas where they have, for example, wildlife for tourism purposes. If they're not protected, if they're not able to take care of them properly, they will not be able to have that income from tourism. So we have to work more with the private sector, with industry, with the governments to elevate the importance of nature. And I think here the GEF can come in with those, with that seed money, with being able to encourage this, that these should not be paper parks, that they have to have real investment in them. The other issue that I have seen throughout my career working on biodiversity is that often these paper parks, this 30%, are the easy places that you can set aside. We have to work with other sectors. There's the transport sector, there's the infrastructure building, and that's why it's very difficult to be able to have real areas that need to have better protection put in place, because it's a struggle to be able to work with agriculture. It's a struggle to work with infrastructure, with transport, making highways, etc. And I think here again, it's another area of work where we integrate, in the case of CITES, that species conservation into the broader ecosystem work, the broader landscape work, to be able to have appropriate places. And again, we have to think about sustainable use. We have to think about the local communities, the people. We have to consider the people. How will they be incentivized to take care of those natural places, to be able to know that this somehow benefits them? And again, I think we have to put people at the center in the next replenishment as well, to make sure that they have those appropriate incentives to conserve nature and those habitats.
Thank you, Yvonne. And with this, we finish this first round. Please join me all and give a good hand to all of the head of the conventions here. And with this, I would like to open the floor to council members for whatever the questions, interventions, reactions that you will have. I got Anders from Sweden. Anders, the floor is yours.
Thank you. First, let me appreciate this new format of exchange with all the MEIs. Also very useful for all of us as council delegates to take this information in a horizontal and harmonized way. I want to pick up first on what Simon from the UNFCCC raised. The strong coordination between the funds to achieve the greatest possible impact is indeed very welcome. And yes, we certainly welcome harmonization and cooperation between the funds as well, while avoiding overlapping of mandates. Supportive also of the synergistic implementation and blended finances raised by Luis from the UNCCD. Supportive of the messages by Ralph on the GEF as a spring, where we need to bring in private sector and guarantees to add long-term results at a larger scale than what we can only do through the GEF funding. So very much supportive of that as well, and supportive of the reflections on reviewing protected, unprotected areas. Also want to pick up on what the GEF CEO initial guiding question raised in the opening was, that what happens in these COPs and what is relevant for the next replenishment. Because to us, to Sweden, as stated in Paris, we want to see a fair and balanced allocation of resources in GEF 9 between all of the focal areas the GEF serves to deliver strong results to all the MEAs the GEF serves. I also want to come back on the point we made at the 68th council meeting. We want to raise our strong concern over the excessive guidance by us, the parties, at the COPs. We saw yesterday that this also translates into budget implications for the Secretariat of the GEF, These are resources which we believe should, to a larger extent, be spent on implementing additional projects to the fulfillment of the MEAs at the country level. And again, the document at hand for this agenda item is one of the most extensive, where this is a responsibility for us as the parties to the Council and to the COPs in particular, to increasingly take our responsibility in prioritizing and putting forward guidance which is of concrete relevance to the GEF and not related to other purposes than the GEF itself. We therefore strongly welcome the proposal, which is discussed later this week, to have biannual MOUs only every second COP with the UNFCCC. And we would welcome to review the same approach in the sister COPs as well, in increasingly relying on the overall MOUs and having guidance more as necessary in advance of the replenishments. That could free resources which we could find more uses for in the fulfillment of the MEAs. As the biggest per capita donor, Sweden strongly appreciates the role of the GEF in implementing all of these MEAs. The GEF has a very highly cost-efficient secretariat structure, and the synergies, as was pointed out in the panel discussion, are very positive and something which we can tap into through this unique structure which the GEF provides, which is beneficial for the achievement of results and impact at a scale. And also, as the GEF CEO outlined, this council provides resources at a scale to all of the MEAs, of which we are certainly highly supportive, and this is a very unique feature of the GEF, which we need to preserve and nurture among the council and the delegates to the COPs. At the same time, do not take us for granted. As we discussed also at the 68th Council in December, the recurrent calls for new funds with sometimes unclear added value and the associated uncertainty for the long-term financial commitments to the existing financial mechanisms created at the COPs are not necessarily helpful as we move into the GEF 9 replenishments. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I now got IPAC followed by Regina. IPAC, you got the floor.
All right, thank you very much. We acknowledge the important work of the GEF done under the Minamata Convention to address mercury-related issues, which disproportionately affect indigenous people and their territories. As frontline community, indigenous people bring valuable knowledge and are essential to successful implementation of actions. We respectfully call on for greater support of GEF to enable indigenous people's meaningful participation in convention processes. GEF resources can play a key role in bridging current gaps and empowering indigenous people to participate in their consultations with Minamata like COP itself. We want to recognize the strong interest we've seen in the Minamata Convention Secretariat and notably the Executive Secretary. This is an area that better communications from Minamata Convention Secretariat and indigenous people. At the CBD, we welcome the creation of the new subsidiary body on Article 8J. We expect that the GEF will actively involve. We encourage the CBD Secretariat to provide opportunities for GEF and the GBFF Secretariat to build awareness and understanding of the institution which participants at upcoming meetings. Indigenous people acknowledge GEF's growing support to ensure our voices are heard across multinational environmental conventions. With regards to the UN plastic treaties, we remain concerned that despite being disproportionately affected by plastic pollutions throughout its entire cycle, indigenous people have not yet been meaningfully included in the negotiation process. To strengthen our engagement, we respectfully recommend that the GEF support the creation of a dedicated funding mechanism that allows for direct access by indigenous people. This support will help integrate indigenous people's knowledge into project design and implementations, ensure full and effective participation in decision-making, and will recognize indigenous peoples as right holders, contributing to more inclusive and meaningful solutions to this plastic crisis. We also would like to request for an increased support of indigenous peoples, engage meaningfully in the different conventions that affect indigenous people's lives, at the ground level and livelihood. For example, we are talking about the conventions on biological diversity, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC. We talk about the Stockholm on the persistent organic pollutants. United Nations Convention on Desertification, the Minamata Convention on Mercury, the biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction agreements under the UN treaties, just to name a few. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It would be great if we can try to avoid doing statements and make the best of the opportunity of having our head of secretaries here to do direct questions and comments to what they presented. Thanks. I got Regina, followed by Jao.
Gracias, Carlos Manuel. I will read the statement that we had already prepared. The constituency welcomes the GEF strategic support for the early implementation of the BBNG agreement, particularly as a participating country in the enabling activities project under GEF 8. Mexico acknowledges the value of this early phase support in building national, legal, and technical capacities. We encourage the GEF to maintain this momentum and to ensure continued assistance that reflects the inclusive and science-based nature of this new ocean governance framework. Second, we take note of the upcoming deadlines for multiple national reporting instruments under the international conventions addressed. In this regard, the constituency respectfully urges the GEF and implementing agencies to streamline and reinforce technical assistance for countries facing overlapping compliance demands. Third, we underline the importance of sustained and increased financial for chemicals and hazardous waste management under GEF 9, the implementation of the Minamata Convention and the evolving priorities of the Stockholm Convention require stronger resource allocation. We believe that synergies between pollution control, biodiversity, and environmental health should be a central pillar in the programming directions moving forward. In line with this, we also stress the need to improve synergy between different funding sources. In previous programming cycles, projects have occasionally acknowledged the presence of other funds, such as GCF or the Adaptation Fund, in the same territorial areas, yet without formally incorporating them as co-financing partners. True synergy would require that GEF 9 programming actively fosters this articulation, encouraging the formal integration of complementary funding streams to enhance coherence and impact on the ground. Additionally, the constituency would like to thank the GEF Secretariat for the information shared regarding the new fund for responding to loss and damages. We recognize the importance of this mechanism for enhancing global resilience to climate-related impacts. We remain committed to collaborative multilateral action and to advancing solutions that bridge environmental ambition with practical implementation on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I now give the floor to Jao, and after Jao, I'll stop to see if there is any reaction from the secretaries of the convention. Jao, you got the floor.
Many thanks, Mr. CEO. I'll also read a statement built by our constituents, as did my colleague from Mexico, but this without prejudice of comments made by our invitees of today. We would like to warmly thank the executive secretaries of the conventions for their valuable presence in this session. For Brazil, Colombia, and Ecuador, it is of utmost importance to see the GEF actively engaged in dialogue with the multilateral environmental agreements it serves. The role of the GEF in providing means of implementation, particularly for developing countries, is essential to ensure that global commitments translate into effective national action. Seeing this relationship function in a constructive and coordinated way is deeply encouraging, especially considering that the GEF's strategies and operations must remain closely aligned with the guidance and mandates provided by the COPs. We also thank the Secretariat for the updated report on relations with the conventions and other international institutions. We reiterate our strong support for the GEF's central role as a financial mechanism serving multiple MEAs. And we recognize the importance of continued coordination with the respective convention secretariats. We also welcome the efforts undertaken to reflect COP guidance in the GEF's programming directions and operational frameworks. And in that context, we would appreciate further clarification when possible from the Secretariat on how, in practical terms, the priorities and strategic needs identified by the conventions have been taken into account in the ongoing implementation of GEF 8. Additionally, we would welcome further details on how guidance explicitly referring to the 9th replenishment, GEF 9, has been considered in the ongoing discussions, particularly given the GEF's role as the financial mechanism for 6 international environmental conventions. We believe this is a timely juncture to consider how such guidance can be more systematically and explicitly reflected in future GEF strategies. In this regard, and mindful of the forthcoming replenishment or ongoing replenishment process, we would kindly suggest that the document we are discussing for this council includes a forward-looking reference to the importance of ensuring that convention guidance informs the policy directions and programming approach of GEF 9. Such alignment would not only reinforce the coherence and responsiveness of the GEF to the evolving mandates of the conventions it serves, but also help ensure that the voices of developing countries and other key stakeholders, such as indigenous peoples and local communities, whose participation in COP processes has grown significantly, are heard and reflected in council-level decision-making. The legitimacy of the COPs, built on broad participation and inclusivity, must remain a guiding compass for the GEF in supporting country-driven implementation of global commitments. We thus thank the Secretariat once again for its continued engagement with the Convention Secretariats and look forward to further dialogue on this important matter. Thank you.
Thanks to you, Jao. So now I'll pass it over to Kong.
Thank you, Carlos Manuel. And we appreciate this new format that you've come up with to present on the MEAs and the insights from the executive secretaries of the various conventions. The Southern African constituency notes with appreciation the GEF's continued support for implementation of multilateral environmental agreements. We also appreciate the impact these MEAs have made towards sustainable development within our constituency, while noting that there is a lot of work that still needs to be done to meet global targets such as the GBF targets, which have a relation to most of the MEAs presented here. With the constituency being highly vulnerable to the effects of drought, among others, we are pleased that the GEF is discussing the issue of drought mitigation and adaptation in the GEF 9 Technical Advisory Group, and look forward to further strengthening of the land degradation focal area in GEF 9, emphasizing the importance of addressing drought as a global challenge in the context of climate change, biodiversity loss, and land degradation. The G20 summit's emphasis on sustainability and solidarity is expected to bring attention to the unique challenges faced by Southern Africa and foster international cooperation to address them. The summit will provide an opportunity for Southern African countries to collaborate with global leaders, share best practices, and secure international support for regional, environmental, and climate initiatives. We welcome the GEF Secretariat's continued engagement with the G20 Environment and Climate Sustainability Working Group. Now, I have one question as per your request, and it's directed to Rolf. How will you strengthen integration with the GEF Secretariat to ensure that chemical pollution is addressed fully in the KMGBF and the resultant national biodiversity targets are met, especially as we move towards GEF 9? Thank you.
Thank you, Concom. I got 5 or 6 speakers in the list. I'll go through them and then I'll open the floor to the head of the conventions. Now I pass it over to Tsuyoshi, Japan, please. It's Yoko.
Sorry, it's Yoko. Thank you. Thank you so much for all the interactive discussions. It's really helpful for us to think through what's going on with the convention and the way forward for the GEF 9 to formulate our directions. And I try not to make it so much of the statement, but as I prepared, let me just touch upon a few points. The first is the CBD, as presented by the CBD Secretariat. We appreciate the contribution of the GEF Secretariat to the discussions on the resource mobilization related to the GBFF at the CBD COP16 and the 60.2. We expect the GEF to enhance collaboration and synergy with each convention and promotes resource mobilization from all sources to ensure effective and efficient operation of the fund. Regarding the climate finance, as presented by the Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC, we also appreciate the progress in collaboration with other climate funds, such as the GCF, Adaptation Fund, and the CIF. We expect the GEF to continue its effort to enhance access from developing countries. I would also touch upon the non-related conventions as well, because the negotiation on the plastic treaty is coming up. The financial mechanism will be one of the main discussion points for concluding negotiation at the coming INC 5.2 scheduled for this August. We would like to note that there was an opinion from major donor countries to designate the GEF as treaty's financial mechanism. We expect the GEF to further building on its track record of support in addressing plastic pollution and play an important role in this field. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I'll pass it now to Corentin, followed by John.
Yeah, thank you, Carlos Manuel. Indeed, I'm Corentin Janin from Belgium, but I will make my intervention on behalf of my constituency. First of all, congratulations for the new format of this session, particularly interactive. That's much appreciated. But let me comment some aspects of the report with a couple of questions. Of course, we welcome this report and we are grateful to the Secretariat for preparing it. It was very useful. And we appreciate the detailed reactions to the COP guidance. It demonstrates the dynamism and the endeavors of the GEF in the last couple of months, particularly rich in COPs and negotiations. Concerning the relations with the UNFCCC, we welcome the GEF efforts to support the developing countries in meeting their reporting obligations under the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreements, including via the CBIT. We are also pleased to see the GEF investments in supporting the implementation of the national action plans, particularly in the LDCs and SEEDs. And we encourage the GEF to continue to scale up its efforts to support developing countries to further enhance their capacity to access climate finance and the adaptation finance in particular. On the CBD and the biodiversity issues, we commend the detailed information. But we would like to particularly underline the importance of the GEF support to implement the target 18 and 19 of the KMGBF, and in particular to leverage all financial solutions identified in the national biodiversity finance plans. And we would appreciate if this could be done in the most complementary manner with the GBF fund. On the land degradation and drought issues, we would like to express our gratitude to the GEF team and the CEO for their active participation to the COP16 in Riyadh. Compared to the previous COPs, your strong presence in Riyadh was really instrumental to the negotiations and to convey strong, powerful political messages. And concerning the GEF response to the guidance, we would be interested to know more about how the GEF intends to track progress on improving policy coherence. And for the rest, we're also thankful to the Secretariat and to Louise Baker from the Global Mechanism for explaining the need to consider the draft decision on drought, also such as recalled by our colleague from Lesotho. It was important to explain the need to consider the draft decision on drought that was not adopted in Riyadh to better understand the importance to scale up the GEF resources to drought resilience, like via a robust integrated program, for instance. And thanks also for considering the change of the name of the current land degradation focal area. Briefly on the eliminations of the POPs, we would like to emphasize the importance of the GEF support to the sound waste management of liquids and equipments contaminated with PCBs, particularly in view of the 2028 deadlines. We also stress the need to enhance the monitoring capacities of the eligible countries. On plastic pollution, very briefly, we thank the Secretariat for its engagement during the INC meeting in Bangkok. We believe it was very useful for explaining the assets of the GEF to act as the financial mechanism of the plastic treaty. And the IP on the circular solutions to plastic pollution illustrates well the great expertise of the GEF in that field. And to conclude about the BBNG agreement, we are grateful to the GEF staff who participated to the first preparatory committee. The formal intervention and side events contributed a lot to highlight the GEF activities and its functioning, also related to marine biodiversity. And we encourage, of course, the continued engagement of the GEF in the next preparatory committee. But let me also underscore that we highly value the GEF support to facilitate the ratification process. It's indeed essential for this treaty to receive as soon as possible the 60 ratifications to allow its entry into force. And in this regard, we are glad to inform you that Belgium will be able to officially announce its ratification of the BBNG agreement next week at the UN Ocean Conference in Nice next week. Sorry for being a bit long, but thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks to you, Corentin. Now I'll pass it over to John, followed by Andre from Switzerland.
Thank you very much, and good morning. Just to start by expressing appreciation, I think, for this interactive format, which I think was very informative, but also to our secretariats, both for their presentations and answers, but also for their attendance here in person, which I think is very helpful. I also wanted to thank the GEF Secretariat for the report you have provided, as well as, I think, your ongoing efforts to engage the secretariats, I think, in a very effective way. Maybe I could just share a few thoughts. I think the first, which you have heard from us before, but just to say we welcome the large share of chemicals and waste support that are in this work program. We think there's a lot of critical work that's going on in the chemicals and waste space, including in the most recent, as well as some of the upcoming COPs. Ralph and Monica may want to speak a little bit more as to how really this support is absolutely critical to allowing for the continued, I think we have continued incremental real progress that we're seeing in those forums And so I think it's really helpful what GEF is doing in that space. With respect to the report, I just want to mention that we do want to ensure that convention obligations are accurately characterized and that the GEF is directing funds towards convention obligations. For example, in project 11881, supporting ratification and phase down of HFCs, it sort of has this framing of encouraging instead of requiring recipients to phase down HFCs and establish licensing and quota systems. Just to say, we hope that these projects will, in fact, ensure compliance with the country obligations under the Kigali Amendment. And I would just encourage that the Secretariat consult closely with the Montreal Protocol Multilateral Fund Secretariat as well, which is working in this space for all of the Article 5 countries in the Montreal Protocol to also ensure consistency in the finance approach to the countries that are covered here. And then finally, just let me say, I did want to briefly agree with the point Sweden made earlier on limiting the scope of GEF guidance to issues that are specific to the GEF. I'd appreciate any insights from our speakers here today on how we can best manage this, because I think our goal would be to make such advice both relevant and impactful. And since we have the convention secretariats here who see that firsthand, if they have any thoughts on that, that would be most welcome. Thank you.
Thanks to you, John. Now I give the floor to Andre, followed by Rashid. Andre?
Thank you very much. We would like to thank all the MEA secretariats for their presence here and the discussion today. And we would like to thank the GEF Secretariat and the GEF CEO personally for his engagement with the MEAs and active dialogue, not only today, but also over the past year. We have a few questions to the executive secretaries. As you know, we've been confronted with a series of criticisms, which in our view is largely non-substantiated. As GEF Council, we are doing our best to react to the guidance received from the various MEAs and address the criticisms as much as we can. So what can you do to strengthen the GEF as a political partnership, recognizing that the MEAs and their secretariats in our way are key partners in the partnership? And then we would like to support the point from Japan and welcome the information note on the GEF and plastics. We welcome the engagement and will continue to reach out to the Secretariat in view of the upcoming negotiations at the INC 5.2. We also fully support the point that our colleague from the US just made on the Minamata and the Stockholm Convention. Thank you.
Thanks to you. Now I'll pass it over to Rashid, followed by Andrea.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Donc, je vous remercie d'avoir organisé cette réunion.
Thank you for organizing this meeting, grouping the multilateral agreements, including the ones for which we are not a financial mechanism. We are aware of the challenges of coordination. As André mentioned, this is a topic that was mentioned in multilateral meetings. The last initiative to compensate was Morocco, when they chaired an agreement a day to reinforce coordination of synergies and putting in common our resources to ensure sustainability. This greater cooperation will allow us to leave our silos and to work in a more integrated manner, which is essential to meet all those interconnected challenges. It will also give the member states a strategic means to improve their political coherence in their national framework and to maximize the cost effectiveness of their investments. Strengthened cooperation between GEF, and all the other funds will allow our multilateral based on a common framework, taking into account our common goals and a coordinated use of the resources through complementarity. An integrated approach that was launched a few years ago by the GEF, to our mind, is the best response to fight against these coordination constraints, and we invite the Secretariat to continue to improve our management of our resources in future cycles. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much. Now I give the floor to Andrea, followed by Mauricio.
Thank you very much. And thank you so much for this interactive panel approach. We really appreciate the Secretariats being present here. It's great. Thank you. We welcome all efforts to progress complementarity and coherence between the MEAs, and we welcome the report. Thank you. Like Mexico, we're interested in how we can streamline and be more joined up in MEA reporting, because we know reporting can be a real burden for smaller countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrea. Now I got Mauricio, followed by Kat, but it's not Kat, it's Canada, but I forgot your name.
Muchas gracias, Carlos Manuel.
Thank you very much, Carlos Manuel. First of all, we would like to thank you for this new discussion format. It allows us to have a more fluid and seamless communication. The group from the Southern Cone in Latin America supports the decision of the Council and wants to highlight the following. First, as we have been able to see, the focal area of land degradation has less resources as compared to other areas. Considering that the impact of land degradation is visible and impacts our countries, we request that there be consideration for a greater allocation to this focal area. Secondly, although there has been an increase in reporting from countries in the framework of the conventions, especially the Convention on Climate Change, this has not led to greater resources. And third, beyond the discussion on possible new financial agencies for the Biological Diversity Convention, what countries in development are worried about is the lack of financing for all funds that exist, especially the GEF as well as GBFF face serious limitations with respect to the available resources given the increasing needs in biodiversity. The discussion about the institutions that make up the GBFF will not resolve this problem in and of itself. It will be essential that any discussion on the mechanisms on biological diversity has an increase in available funds and ensures that whatever the result of the negotiations is in this framework, that we have efficiency and access to the system for all developing countries. Thank you. Thank you.
Rebecca, followed by Nicolas.
Thank you. As this is my first time taking the floor, I'm Rebecca Neeson, filling in for Garth Earhart, our alternate council member. I'd like to first thank the convention secretariats for being here, and we really appreciate this candid conversation on what GEF 9 can and should cover. I know that some were at the replenishment meeting in Paris, but we would encourage the continued engagement at future replenishment meetings. I did have a question as requested. We heard many of you mention the need for innovation and blended financing. Do you have any specific insights on continuing the integrated programs in the GEF 9? Onto the report, Canada welcomes the GEF report on its engagements with multilateral environmental conventions and other international institutions. We strongly support the ongoing collaboration between the GEF and the key global frameworks and welcome its sustained and active engagement. I won't name all the engagements because that would take a while. We recognize the vital role these partnerships play in advancing environmental goals. We are committed to deepening this cooperation as it is essential to addressing climate change, halting biodiversity loss, and combating desertification at a global scale. We know that the strength of the GEF comes from serving 6 MEAs, which helps achieve synergies for funding and address multiple environmental outcomes. We'd also like to acknowledge the GEF Secretariat for its active role in other key MEA engagements, where it's helped explain how the GEF is responding to guidance, explored ways to strengthen engagement, and addressed concerns and questions about GEF support. We know that this has played a critical role in providing accurate and timely information on the GEF's work and ongoing negotiations. We look forward to further strengthening the GEF's collaboration and partnership with conventions and other international institutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'll give the floor to Nicolas and then the CSO network, which is the last speaker in the here, and then I'll pass it over to for a 1 minute response from the head of the convention. So, Nicolas, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Carlos Manuel, and thank you very much for this new format. We are very much looking forward to episode 2. And thank you especially for season 2. All right. Thank you especially to you, the MEA representatives, for your presence today. Your encouraging intervention made clear that despite all geopolitical headwinds and competition for limited public resources, there is no good alternative to multilateralism and close cooperation. And strong cooperation is the prerequisite for better exploiting the synergies to tackle the triple crisis of biodiversity loss, environmental pollution, and climate change. And GEF 9 programming offers a strong opportunity to strengthen that integration, and is our joint responsibility as a council and the Secretariat to deliver. In this regard, I would like to address one specific issue with regards to wildlife conservation. For Germany, it is very important to continue exploring a closer cooperation with the Convention on Migratory Species, the CMS, and of course, with the CITES Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, for example, in the framework of the GEF Integrated Wildlife Conservation Program and beyond that. Both conventions, in our opinion, play an essential role in implementing the GBF. However, the lack of funding not only hinders the implementation of the CMS work program, but also the implementation of the wildlife-related targets of the GBF in general. And although we heard that the GEF is not the financial mechanism for CMS and CITES, both conventions, in our opinion, would benefit from an even closer cooperation in the future. So my question to Yvonne and Carlos Manuel would be how the Secretariats intend to foster even closer cooperation and possibilities for financing the work of wildlife-related issues under GEF 9. And on the further issues of the report, my question would be if I follow with that now or if we will have a second round for that.
Thank you. It is now.
Yeah. Again. So we very much welcome the Secretariat's ongoing outreach to the conventions and other multilateral climate funds. And for the most effective use of multilateral funding, it is important that the GEF acts in coherence with the rest of the environmental architecture. We are pleased to see the Secretariat is taking an active role in the BBNJ PrepComs and in the INC discussions, especially. Once BBNJ is in force, it is in our strongest interest that the GEF is well prepared to support its implementation. This would also further showcase that the GEF is the best place to host the financial mechanism of a global treaty on plastic pollution. And the Secretariat should continue to promote the GEF's unique role in integrating approach to parties and stakeholders. It is very promising to hear about the Secretariat's participation in UNCCD. We strongly encourage further outreach to interested parties in the Gulf region, and we should explore ways to align GEF land degradation activities with the new global drought resilience partnership. We are very interested in any further information the Secretariat could share with us. Moreover, we support the further work on the Multilateral Climate Fund's Joint Action Plan. This is a key initiative for more coherence that we will continue to follow very actively, and we would like the Secretariat to share some concrete measures the working groups are preparing, as well as possible updates to the action plan's timeline. And finally, we also welcome the Adaptation Fund's efforts to exclusively serve the Paris Agreement. However, it's not clear what effect the new Memorandum of Understanding regarding Secretariat services to the Adaptation Funds Board will have on GEF operations. And we would be grateful if the Secretariat could clear this up. Thank you very much.
Thanks to you, Nicolas. I got Larissa online from Abidjan. Larissa, the floor is yours.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le CEO.
Thank you very much, CEO. Good morning, all. Following on what was said before me, I would like to congratulate the Secretariat, the GEF Secretariat, and the CEO himself for this initiative, this brilliant initiative of ensuring a synergy of action with the other financial mechanisms, including the Green Fund and the Adaptation Fund. So, for us developing countries, and for specifically the coastal countries, this is something that we welcome because, as was stated before me, the resources granted for financing climate action and towards conservation of biodiversity and sustainable land management are insufficient, and our government don't have more funding. And so, to ensure synergy and coordination between the various financial mechanisms would allow us to optimize the management of these resources and to allocate them directly to the current needs. But I do have questions as to what is the concrete approach that is considered so that at a national level, since there are also focal points for the Green Fund and the Adaptation Fund, how, concretely speaking, at a national level, you are going to implement that coordination? What could be the recommendations that you would give us as operational focal points for the GEF in order to be able to reflect this coordination at the international level with the various funds? Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Larissa. I got Rosanna asking for the floor, please.
Thank you very much. We also welcome very much this format, and thank you for the participation of all these important convention secretariats representatives here. It is crucial that we reflect upon the pressing challenges that confront the global environment as we depend entirely on healthy and varied ecosystems. The conservation of the global ecosystems no longer constitutes merely an altruistic dimension. It's vital to ensuring our very survival. In light of this, we highly recognizing the multilateralism and importance of synergy between Rio Conventions. And since May 22, 1992, the adoption of the initial text of the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, many areas of the planet are now being conserved as part of protected areas and biodiversity hotspots. Milestones made by the CBD should be underscored for their far-reaching influence on nations across the globe. The development and adoption of the Global Biodiversity Framework, which culminated in the historic meeting in Rome, is a significant milestone to achieve 4 long-term goals and 23 urgent targets of Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework by 2013. Dear colleagues, Armenia is honored to host the next CBD COP17 in 2026, which is a responsibility we embrace as a chance to lead by example in global biodiversity protection. Armenia stands ready to facilitate meaningful and inclusive multilateral discussions during the COP17 in Yerevan for fostering open exchange of ideas between the governments and non-governmental stakeholders on pressing biodiversity challenges and for devising effective multilateral actions to further the objectives of KMGBF. Armenia initiated the signing process of the BBNG agreement. The document is also important from the scientific point of view, as the agreement will open new ways for the scientific community to participate in global marine scientific research initiatives. And Armenia also planning to officially announce about it in Nice during the Ocean Conference. The climate COP30 to be held in Brazil will be remarkable, and we are looking to go ahead with decisions such as enhancing synergies between the 3 Rio conventions and development of actions, accessibility to transfer of new technologies, availability, accessibility, and transparency of financial resources, fully operationalization of the loss and damage fund, and submission of new NDC 3, which intends to set more ambitious targets than the previous NDCs. We are looking for increased climate finance and support for adaptation with the focus on gender-responsive climate action, nature-based solutions, biodiversity conservation, and just transition to renewable energy. We welcome also the Basel, Rotterdam, Stockholm Conventions, Minamata Convention, and a number of normative legal acts to implement obligations assumed under these conventions with the aim of environmentally sound management and prevention of chemicals and waste illegal traffic are adopted. We support the listing of new industrial chemicals and pesticides in Annex 3 of the Rotterdam Convention and in Annex A of the Stockholm Convention. And also we welcome the Basel Convention Partnership Program for 2026-2027 and our compliments also to the Secretariats of UN Convention to Combat Desertification, to CITES Convention, and all other global agreements which help countries to address the challenges which are already have a global impact on environment. Thank you.
Thanks to you. I got Maria from the CSO network, and then Filippo, Ambassador Filippo. Please, Maria.
First, thank you, Carlos Manuel. I really enjoy and like this format. But still, we have our statement from the network. The CSO network acknowledged the relevance of the document relations with conventions and other international institutions for civil society engagement within the GEF network. This document offers critical insights into the GEF evolving collaboration with multilateral environmental agreement, MIAs, including UNFCCC, CBD, UNCCD, and the Stockholm and Minamata Conventions. The document highlights recent convention decisions that directly request GEF to enhance its support to indigenous peoples and local communities, women and youth, including, and CBD COP16 further requests the Global Environmental Facility to explore ways to further improve, facilitate access, and increase direct funding to indigenous people and local communities, women and youth, ensuring that those resources support their rights and knowledge systems. UNFCCC COP29 encouraged the Global Environmental Facility to clearly outline in its work programs how indigenous people as well as local communities can meaningfully engage in the development of Global Environmental Facility programs and projects and benefit therefrom. And in UNCCD COP16 welcomed the GEF land degradation focal area strategies, emphasized on people in vulnerable situations such as women, children, youth, indigenous people, local communities, and traditional communities. GEF needs to ensure that this convention's guidance is fully incorporated into strategies, programs, and projects moving forward. We also underscore the importance for civil society of this state of the GEF's work within convention for the following reasons. Strategic alignment. The document outlines current and future priorities of the GEF in relationship to global conventions. This allows civil society to align its actions and proposals with multilateral environmental agendas, increasing relevance and impact. Transparency and accountability. By reviewing institutional partnerships and coordination mechanisms, This document contributes to greater transparency and essential conditions for meaningful civil society participation. Opportunities for engagement. The update of interinstitutional cooperation provides civil society with a clear understanding of entry point for policy dialogue and project development within the GEF and across related international frameworks. We encourage the Council to ensure that the principles of inclusiveness and participatory governance highlighted in this document are operationalized through formal channels of civil society engagement. We also urge further clarification on how these institutional relationships translate into direct opportunities for grassroots organizations, particularly indigenous people, women-led groups, and youth. Moving forward, the GEF must continue and expand its commitment to multi-stakeholder collaboration and policy coherence across the environmental governance system. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria. I got Filippo, followed by Stephanie.
Thank you very much, Carlos Manuel, and congratulations for the new format. We, like others, look forward to season 2. And thank you for the MEA secretariats for being here. This has been a very enlightening session. And again, thinking back to our session on communications and visibility of GEF, I'm amazed that when I look at the global system, you have the UN Security Council that's responsible for security, you have the financial institutions, the development agencies, and GEF sits at the middle of it, being the addressing the financing of the most critical issues of our time. And GEF's importance clearly will only grow with time and as the global constituency realizes the importance of it. And of course, we come at it from different contexts. And for the Pacific constituency, I'm particularly glad with the points you made yesterday, Carlos Manuel, on communication, and the points you made today about the fact that the fund has to buy vehicles and things like this to enable the implementation of projects. And on that note, on this talk of collaboration and integration, for the benefit of the small island countries who are capacity challenged, would it be possible to come up with some sort of what I would call a results chain from the council level at the global level, so to speak, and showing the integration with MEAs all the way down to implementation, to complement the map that you are talking about of showing protected and unprotected areas. Because for us, one of the biggest challenges is marine spatial planning. And that would benefit, I think, from something with that shows a collaborative results chain across the MEAs. Thank you very much.
Thanks to you. Stephanie?
Bonjour à tous, je vais m'exprimer en français.
Hello everyone, I will be speaking French. First of all, allow me to thank all of the representatives of the conventions for this dialogue and all of the points that you raised, which are quite important. You all underscored the unique role that the GEF plays in addressing environmental challenges through the various conventions, and that's one of France's priorities for GEF 9. We want to preserve that ability of the GEF to multitask so that we can cover all dimensions of the environmental crisis. I think that someone's missing an imaginary person, a representative from the upcoming treaty on plastics. We hope that this will be concluded as quickly as possible because this is a major source of pollution. We encourage all countries who have not yet done so to support the declaration, the NEAT's wake-up call for an ambitious plastics treaty. And if you'd like to learn more, we're here to help. Thank you.
Thank you so much to every single council member for their interventions. So I now go for a 1-minute reaction of everyone over here, and then I'll finish the business on this agenda item together with Chizuru. So, Luis, over to you, please.
Woo, me first. Wow, that's challenging. Thank you. Just quickly reflecting on a couple of the comments, certainly from the CSO network, we are absolutely focusing on the impact of the environment on people. And it's really been critical for all of the projects that we've engaged women, youth, and Indigenous people in the project development. From the Southern Africa comments, we fully endorse those. I think from our perspective, these large-scale restoration programs that are multi-country, multi-sector give us the best opportunity of leveraging the land degradation focal area and delivering synergies from the other conventions. The Great Green Wall in the Sahel being an obvious example which benefited from GEF support. We're now looking to try to replicate that with the countries in Southern Africa and with Southern African leadership, particularly in the context of the G20. And I think the vision and ambition there of environment really changing the economic kind of situation and the sort of social situation is really important. Welcome the comments around drought and resilience and ensuring they're integrated into GEF 9. We fully agree on streamlining reporting and think there is an opportunity, particularly to use technology in future GEF reporting rounds to streamline that process so it's less painful for everybody. Absolutely agree that we're very happy with the programming direction, but we hope that the financing will follow. We support the integrated programs and think that they really are delivering, again, a sort of joined up approach. So for things like the SIDS, where we're prioritizing the most vulnerable people, the kind of ridge to reef, land and water combination is really important. So that we don't just focus on the blue economy in small island developing states, because losing a hectare of land on a small island developing state is vital. So these integrated programs really allow a different joined up approach, and the Drylands Drought Program doing a similar sort of thing, combining land and water in a very strategic way. On the Riyadh Drought Resilience Partnership, I'll leave that to the Secretariat, but there is a follow-up meeting at the end of June, which will look about next steps and a roadmap on that, and we can inform Council about that information. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Luis. Thank you so much. Jibin, over to you.
Thank you, Carlos. So many questions or remarks, so it will take quite a while to respond. But I just focus on one thing, because Brazil, Sweden, United States, Canada, Switzerland, and all talk about the guidance from convention to a financial mechanism. So basically, in the instrument or convention itself, is talk about the guidance should be in the form of program priorities. So program priorities, we understood is about what to be financed. And then it does not really go further to say how much, when, where. Probably that's a kind of executive decision by council. So that's perhaps a division from labor. And so many people say you got too many requests to the GEF, and we're kind of expert in that. And we try to, at CBD, we try to consolidate all this guidance into like kind of 4-year framework in anticipation of the GEF replenishment. And we tried a few times, we are still learning how to do better, but still is a very long document. And that's quite in terms of substance. Actually, in the past, at COP16, we compare the past guidance against GBF, Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. And we find a number of areas actually we did not have guidance. So actually there are going to be more forthcoming for GEF to consider. And one thing I find in this process, normally in the interactions between two institutions, so you provide the guidance, there could have been like feedback from the recipient side. See, this one is good, the other one just not operational, it cannot be operationalized. But this the feedback loop, somehow I have not seen in this process, or it's designed in another way, or in the future, these elements could be introduced. Like, I now GEF Secretary to really provide feedback on this guidance. That might be very helpful. And so many comments, I just want to say that we heard IPAC's comments. We will work together with GEF Secretary to make sure there are full participation in up-and-coming meetings of subsidiary bodies. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Monica, please.
Yes, thank you. I will also reflect on the guidance, and perhaps we are one of the only or few of MEAs that has provided rather neat and concise guidance to GEF so far. And I would say it's all about having also complementary channels of communication. So how GEF can also be responsive to any concerns that might be raised, whether they are common or from individual countries. And from what I have seen, I have a possibility to raise my concerns with Claude, with Carlos Manuel, with other senior leadership in the GEF. And I would say the strength of organization is also of its ability to reinvent itself and be open to feedback and build on it. That's actual strength. And the bigger organization it is, the more of it should be. So what I've seen recently is what's happening with the MOPAN benchmarking and so on. So I would encourage to go as deep as GEF can, learn from it and go and be stronger. Then I would like to also reflect on biodiversity points that were raised by a representative from Mexico and South Africa. Currently, the monitoring framework of the GBF is still lacking indicators for chemicals. It's a really weak point of the framework because at the end of the day, we would like to account for the progress done by BRS, by Minamata when in 2030. But there has been now a call from Executive Secretary of CBD to provide information on such indicators to which we respond. So we are hopeful that will be rectified. And another interesting decision from last CBD COP is about inviting the governing bodies of the Chemicals and Waste Conventions to collaborate with Rio Convention on implementing Target 7. I think we should really keep an eye on that invitation because it could be a driving force for nice complementaries in the future. And the last point about indigenous peoples, they are, and local communities, they are in the middle of the upcoming, as we call it, perfect storm related to skyrocketing prices of gold and gold rush that is happening in many countries. So now there is absolutely a high expectation not only to engage indigenous peoples, but also to think how we are going to do it, how to ensure effective and meaningful, legitimate participation. This has to be really unpacked, and we are happy to learn from others how to do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let me pass it over to Vladimir, please.
Thank you, Carlos Manuel. Let me also focus on the guidance. I'll recall that the preparatory commission, which was established by the General Assembly, United Nations General Assembly, to prepare for the entry into force of the EBNJ agreement, and the convening of the first COP, considered actually in April. I misspoke earlier today. At its first session, the arrangements with GEF to give effect to the relevant provisions of funding of the agreement on the basis, and it was on the basis of an 8 discussions and negotiations prepared by the co-chair. A revision document will be, a revised document will be prepared for the second session of the preparatory commission, which will be held in August this year. We hope to be able to provide more information at future meetings, either of the replenishment process or of the Council, concerning the outcome. There was also a discussion of providing preliminary guidance of future funding needs. What is clear that at this moment, the funding needs will continue in terms of supporting ratification and participation in the BBNG agreement, but also already focusing and looking forward towards implementation of the agreement will be of essence. Thank you, Carlos Manuel.
Thanks to you, Vladimir. Rolf?
Thank you very much. And I would like to thank, of course, the council members for this very rich exchange. I mean, it was very rich. I mean, first, maybe I will also join colleagues in talking about the guidance. This is an important process because it allows the views coming from the COPs to come to the GEF Council. And here I'm not talking about shopping lists because this is not what I'm expecting the parties to be giving us. And of course, for example, on the Stockholm Convention, we have the needs assessment, but also what we've been doing, and this is linked to the comment raised on compliance mechanism. At the last COP, we agreed on the compliance mechanism after many years of negotiations under the Stockholm Convention. And we had this internal discussion on how we can bring those three stools, leg to a stool together. That is the guidance to the GEF, the effectiveness mechanism, evaluation, and of course, the compliance mechanism. And we've been working with parties, obviously, to streamline this whole process and to ensure that the guidance that we are sending to the GEF is reflecting from those three processes and ensuring as well when we have the compliance mechanism, it is done to support the countries to meet their obligations under the conventions. So in terms of the coming Montreal biodiversity framework, there you go. I've got a lot of other acronyms in my area. And I agree with Monica said, we need to do further work on this. We want to engage. We've had several meetings with the CBD Secretariat, and we want to engage further, especially on target 7, but also there's other targets where we feel there could be also cooperation, and we are looking forward to the development of those indicators, but also especially with highly hazardous pesticides. One was listed at the last COP under the Rotterdam Convention, and of course there's important area of work for us there. And with regards to partnership, we have had now a very strong mandate to take into account biodiversity as well as climate change co-benefits in the work that we do. And of course, Carlos Manuel was there for our COPs, and we had, 6 events, including both all the COP. We had specific regional meetings with different regional groups. So it was really an opportunity for us to create more awareness and communication on what the GEF does and how it's really supporting countries in implementing the projects, but at the same time provide the link with the work that you're all doing, in supporting the implementation of the Stockholm Convention. So we did quite a lot of work, and we had quite a lot of interactions during our COPs, where we had the chance as well of having, as I mentioned before, the other executive secretaries and try together with the GEF CEO to find the interlinkages between both biodiversity, climate change, and other pollution and health dimensions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rolf. Last but not least, Yvonne.
Thank you so much. And a couple points. I'm very happy also with the feedback. I took on board that it seems like the majority do agree that there should be synergies and we should be working together as best as possible for better outcomes. I'm very happy to hear that. On the issue of innovative mechanisms, innovative financing mechanisms, very much support this. Our parties are constantly talking about sustainable financing. I don't think there's any other mechanisms that we could use except for making sure that there's private finance, that there's blended finance, that we're working on these types of instruments and bonds and others to be able to support their work, because they always discuss how the costs are local for conservation, for wildlife conservation, but the benefits are global, and that they feel that they need to have more support to be able to continue wildlife conservation. So full support for that. On the questions from Germany about cooperation, I have a very good example of what happened yesterday with CMS. But just to say in general, we just, for example, received a request from the CBD Secretariat to give our comments. We have a biodiversity liaison group where all the conventions related to biodiversity work together. And Jireen is the author of the email that we got just yesterday, to be able to give our contributions to the GEF 9 documents for the general directions, et cetera. So there is the communication between the conventions to see what our needs are and how we can join up, particularly, as I mentioned, because of the KMGBF, which, as you know, has two major targets about nature, about sustainable and legal wildlife trade, about ensuring that wildlife management is sustainable. So all of these things come together under GBF, and we have that good relationship. And the example yesterday, we had an online meeting on jaguars, because there's a desire for the countries who are range states to the jaguar to have a resolution and some work done with jaguars. And the GEF has already suggested that for the face-to-face meeting just before our COP, which is going to happen in November, that because there's this global wildlife program working on jaguars, many projects working on jaguars, they would be able to participate and contribute to that face-to-face meeting to come up with with the final resolution, draft resolution to present at the COP. So there is that cooperation. There is a cooperation with those working on programs of the GEF. And I mentioned this jaguar issue because it's one of the favorite species of Carlos Manuel.
I was going to say something about it.
You have to do something about this. Thank you so much.
You don't know how many countries are using their started resources for jaguar conservation. Thanks, Yvonne. So please join me once more with saying thanks to the panelists. Muchas gracias. We can move over. Thank you, Luis. And let me ask my co-chair to join me with Chizuru as well. Thanks, everyone. In order to conclude this agenda item, I would like to offer the floor to Chiz. Chiz, it's yours.
Thank you very much. On the report on the relations with conventions and international organizations, there were a number of questions posed, so I will very concisely respond to the specific questions. On the question, as well as comment raised by Jiao on having a systematic reflection on the guidance and how we're doing that in the GEF 9 documents, we can do that. We will provide a section in the upcoming council report, as well as the one for the May of 2026. There was a question on how we're tracking policy coherence. This was from Corentin, and the response is that we are actually looking into having a monitoring tracking of policy coherence at the project, program, and portfolio level, and that will be as part of the GEF 9 results framework. From John, the United States, on the specific question on MLF, all projects that we have that touches upon the Montreal Protocol, those are co-reviewed by the MLF Secretariat. So there is good coordination of it as well as cooperation going on. And as a matter of fact, the project that you mentioned has been reviewed by the Montreal Protocol MLF Secretariat. A lot of comments on the plastics from Rebecca from Canada, Yoko from Japan, Nicholas from Germany. We will be present at the 5.2 in early August, and we will be preparing additional information documents as well as briefing sessions for those who would like to hear more from us in terms of what the GEF option might be in light with the text, as well as additional options under consideration. There was a question on key initiatives and progress made on MLF. This was a question from Nicholas from Germany. We did post a progress report information document on GEF and GCF LTV long-term vision on complementarity. So please take a look at that. There is quite a bit of ongoing work vis-a-vis the strategic integration of elements that would help us do better programming as well as harmonization. And those elements are to be reflected in further iterations of the replenishment documents, including for the LDCF and SCCF. Question from Larissa on how are we coordinating implementation across the MEAs on the ground? We're doing that based on, in part through the country platforms in certain cases. Other times we are doing investment plannings. Other times the countries would make a specific request for us. And if that happens and we can get all the funds aligned, we will also try to do those on the country specific or sub-region specific matters. Last but not least, on the question on streamlining or reporting, as well as guidance, as well as decisions, we heard from the MEA secretariats. Just to clarify that this doesn't just apply to the preparation of the reports, but also how the GEF can support the reporting requirements of the countries as well as with the secretariat. So there is ongoing work as well as a little bit of additional thought put into how we can do that in a more streamlined manner. Thank you so much, Carlos Manuel.
Thanks to you, Chis. And after this exchange, I would like to invite Council to adopt the draft decision that is included in document GEF/C 69/06/Rev01. I see no objections. So this agenda item number 7, relationship with the convention and other international institutions, is approved. Thank you so much. Now we will go to the next agenda item 17, which is GEF investment and resource mobilization, the case of the Biodiversity Finance Fund. I would like to invite Mr. Onno van den Heuvel from Biofin to present on GEF's investments and resource mobilization. Buenos días, Onno. Onno, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, first of all.
It has to be read.
Oh, it has to be read, okay. My first time here, so checking out how the mic works. Thank you so much, Carlos Manuel and the GEF and council members to invite me here to share our work of BIFIN on national biodiversity finance plans. I would like to very briefly touch first on what's the origin story of this work, and then I'll share some actual examples and explain a bit more about the program that we have. And I'll also then share some results from BIFIN's work. So I'll be very brief here, but the origin story is really coming out of the Biodiversity Convention, where around 2010, it became clear that countries didn't really have baseline data, how much they're spending, how much they need. And also they didn't really have any kind of strategy. How should they mobilize finance at national level? And so the idea emerged of doing this national biodiversity finance plans that should include that baseline data. So there are two characteristics that were integrated at an early stage that I want to highlight. First of all, the scope of biodiversity here was beyond protected areas. And second, from an early stage, 4 types of finance results were recognized, which is mobilizing finance, but also realigning finance, as well as delivering better the funds that we already have, and finally, preventing future costs as a sort of 4th dimension that we can look at. So since this original idea, this has now grown into a global community of countries. We have more than 130 countries doing a biodiversity finance plan. And this scaling up in particular has been because of the support of the GEF that has been provided recently. So what's the main concept? The main concept is really to, first of all, carry out those baseline measurements to calculate the finance gap. And this is really done by countries with national teams. And once the finance gap is been measured, to create a series of actions that could then close the gap at the national level. So that's a more kind of theoretical approach. But this is really not just about the data and not just about the plans, but it's really kickstarting a process of a national alliance of stakeholders that are working together. So it's really an example of an all-of-government approach in which stakeholders are involved in the process at national level. Is different in every country. So I'm just showing some examples here. For example, the Ministry of Finance definitely is always involved, and also ministries of environment and usually agriculture. And in many countries also work with local government, with the finance sector, central banks, and of course there's local communities and indigenous people. For example, in Guatemala, the work is focusing more on local governments and helping them to budget for biodiversity. And while our work in Zambia is very much anchored in the finance sector, working with regulators and the central bank and pension funds. So let me explain a bit more about the program that the GEF is supporting currently. So it enables 91 countries to create their own biodiversity finance plan. And this follows another set of 41 countries that has already done so under the BioFin core program. And these have been starting their work last year and are now in different stages of progress. So here you can see a schematic overview of the BioFin approach that is then rolled out in the countries. So it includes actually 5 steps. The first 3 are diagnostic. And I'll explain them one by one very briefly after this. And the 4th one is to develop the actual plan. And the 5th one is to then implement the plan, which obviously takes the longest time. So how is this governed? This is actually governed at the national level by steering committees, which are usually co-chaired by ministries of finance and environment, but also include other key stakeholders. And it's also run by national BioFin teams. We put a very strong emphasis on hiring mainly national teams and preventing the hiring of international experts. And we always give the guidance, if you can't find the expert, then try to kind of create the expert. And also if you see a little green ball in the middle called early implementation, that's actually to illustrate that this work of implementation does not start when you completed the biodiversity finance plan, but at any stage of the process, opportunities of financing arise and can be pursued. And for example, in the countries that are supported by the GEF, already 10 countries by now are having work around early implementation. I just want to highlight very briefly as well, there's a strong linkage with what we call the Early Action Support Program and also the MBSAP process. And the Early Action Program has actually enabled countries to already start at a very early stage this work. And all the activities that I'm going to share, countries could start with those early on. And the most important component of the program is the development of the national biodiversity finance plans. But as well in the GF8 and in the GBFF, actually this work is supported. So I think we can safely say that countries are actually enabled to calculate and fill their finance gap. They may not be able to do so in the end, but definitely it's not because of the GF, because I think all the resources are definitely available through the GF to analyze your finance gap and to fill it with an action plan. Now let me then briefly run through those components. The first one is called policy and institution review, but it's much more than, does more than looking only at policies and institutes. It does start by looking what are the key biodiversity policies in a country, and to which extent is biodiversity integrated into other sectoral policies. And then it does a very important mapping of what we call the drivers of biodiversity loss and gain. And you're probably familiar with that at the global level from the IPBES reports. But it's very important that countries are doing this at the national level because they're different in status and importance in different countries. And this information is actually really critical for investment frameworks, because unless we identify what are the forces that make biodiversity go down, we cannot make sure that our finance plans actually help to counter-invest in this. And next, there's also a first inventory of harmful subsidies done in every country. So this is, of course, something that countries need to do under Target 18 of the Global Biodiversity Framework, and they're enabled to do that with this support. But actually, we did find that doing this initial scan is not enough to really come with concrete plans for redesigning those subsidies. So I'll talk more about that a bit later. And also, countries are, for the first time, creating a database of what are the mechanisms that are already out there. And it's a very important feature of the biofin approach to strongly look at what is already there rather than trying to create something new, because those are usually the low-hanging fruit. And finally, it helps to review the important stakeholders, the important actors that need to be included in this journey, and those are taken then to step 2, the biodiversity expenditure review. So what is the expenditure review all about? It's really to create national baseline data at a granular level from all key stakeholders, so in particular the non-biodiversity stakeholders. Usually Ministry of Agriculture are the biggest spender on biodiversity rather than Ministries of Environment in most countries. And we're also trying to do that with the private sector, but by and large the private sector currently does not have much available data. This can change through the rollout of the TNFD in the future. And as well, we are looking at to which extent are those expenditures biodiversity relevant by applying coefficients. Why are we doing that? We're looking first of all at formal objectives. So is biodiversity the primary objective or is it an indirect expenditure? I'm not going to go too much into technical details, but I think it's important to be aware that applying coefficients is important because otherwise relatively big expenditures that are not as much related to biodiversity will distort the numbers. And most importantly, action number 4 is to identify what are the barriers. Why are, for example, governments not able to deliver all the budgets that they have for biodiversity? And this then helps identify the finance solutions that can be ultimately included in the biodiversity finance plan. The next one is a bit more straightforward, is the financial needs assessment. So calculating how much finance we need for every action of the MBSUP. So there's a very strong linkage with the MBSUP process. The MBSUP is a starting point, and you can safely say that the biodiversity finance plan is a financing plan for the MBSUP, although it does go beyond the MBSUP as well. And in most of the countries that we worked, actually, an important sort of byproduct was to enhance the results framework of MBSUPs around the world. Because when we did this analysis and we tried to cost the targets, in many countries, actually, they found that their targets were not necessarily costable, so they were not sufficiently specific or prioritized. So the team has actually helped to enhance the results framework, and sometimes it didn't also exist in countries. Then the next step, which is the 4th one, and just to remind you that from the Global Biodiversity Finance Program, this is then the 4th and final output that countries will develop, is to develop the actual biodiversity finance plan. This is a very practical, action-oriented document. And it starts by actually outlining a vision. What are really the priorities for the country? Is it maybe the 30 by 30 target? Is it mainstreaming into agriculture, or is it something else? And this is a guidance that we're giving in our latest version of the methodology, because before countries were selecting solutions that were not necessarily connected to each other. And it's very important that they are to have more impact. And we also have what we call the catalog of finance solutions. This is a global mapping of any financing mechanism that we found around the world. We already found more than 150. And countries are using that to identify solutions through a kind of long listing, short listing procedure. And they follow a lot of different criteria, but there are 3 primary criteria. So how much volume can we actually mobilize or realize? Is this like a solution of scale? What can be the real biodiversity impact? Because this can be really different for every mechanism. Some mechanisms are more in the area of, for example, green finance, and so the direct biodiversity relevance can be less. And finally, we're looking at feasibility. Is this a low-hanging fruit, or is this something that we may want to do, but is more challenging? And that brings me to the next point of looking at the mix of finance solutions. We also have to come with the right mix. Maybe we want to do some of those solutions that have a lower feasibility but are needed, such as repurposing subsidies or something innovative. But we have to have a good combination of mechanisms that build on something that's already there and those that are new or need changes in legislation and so on. So with that, countries select around 5 to 10 solutions and then hopefully can move to the implementation stage. And I just want to highlight that the countries that are doing that, they also can benefit from support of the GEF and the GBFF for this. And the first countries have already started applying for this fund. And this early implementation is actually being formally recognized in the GEF as a possible funding option. Oh. But that's not all. There's also a component to enable knowledge sharing across countries. And from the very beginning, we have had this kind of knowledge sharing as a primary objective in BIFIN. In particular to the BIFIN workbook that synthesizes the learning from those financing strategies and expenditure reviews from countries. But also we have global conference every 2 years and annual regional meetings where countries are coming together. And these are not standalone meetings. These are really there to benefit the national implementation. And then the fifth and final and longest step is then to implement the biodiversity finance plan. And I just want to share some of the examples of the work that we already have from BIFIN that can illustrate what are some of the results. So far we have seen around $1.6 billion being catalyzed from the 40, actually 30 countries that have started this earlier. And I'll share now some of those results. So just to highlight again that some are let's say we're operating everything in one integrated manner, but some of them are, of course, supported by earlier funding streams than the GF as well. So the first example is from Botswana, where actually this initial analysis demonstrated that the protected area fees were underutilized. There was a potential to increase them. In fact, the potential was calculated to be $1.5 million per year. And through a consultation, in particular, engaging with the tourism sector, the fees were revised back in 2021, and just in time for the COVID, post-COVID tourism rebound. And now the increase in revenue from those fees is around $4 million per year. So it shows really the focus on sustainable finance flows, looking at where finance can continue to flow rather than one-time transactions. And this is also done in connection to a module that we have on results-based budgeting on biodiversity. So to not only look at things like revenue generation, but also integrating the GBF targets into national budgeting framework. I would say that this is one of our top priorities. So let's go to the next example from Kazakhstan, where I want to highlight in particular also that, for example, this initiative and many others are connected to other GF projects. So in this case, it was done fully hand in hand between, let's say, the BIFIN core program and a sister program supported by the GF through the STAR allocation, looking at protected area management. So when Kazakhstan started this journey, they found that the expenditures in protected areas were very limited, and they were mainly focusing on two main protected areas next to urban areas. And they started to look at what are the fundamental reasons why we're not seeing more expenditures. And first of all, they found that the legislation does not specify that protected area management plans actually should be financed. So in 2017, they helped to change the legislation, and now it's very clearly stipulated that protected area management plans should be financed. But as well, it was clear that there was not really a clear methodology for doing those plans. So a new generation of protected area management plans was supported since 2019-20, and once they came into place, the funding has increased significantly. You can see here on the graph that by 2023, the budget reached actually 70 million from the baseline of more around 22 million in 2018. So in 2023 alone, the increase was 30 million, and by now we have seen cumulative increases of more than 70 million over the years. And the next example is also about protected area budgeting. Why I'm highlighting those is because those were found to be among the low-hanging fruit where previous work had been done that could be built on. So it's actually a very similar story. They first found that investments in protected areas were actually very limited, and they started to look at the barriers. So we like to put the question around why we're not yet seeing the financing flow. And they found that more than 90 protected areas in the Philippines were actually proclaimed, but not formally gazetted. And so they had to be written into the legislation specifically. So in 2018, this was actually done, working with a member of parliament. And I think this again shows an example of work following an all-of-government approach to work, for example, with parliament members who are not traditionally the biodiversity stakeholders. And then all those 91 protected areas were written into the law. They worked with the same parliament member on a new budget proposal of $45 million for the next 3 years. And this was also approved by the parliament. And if you look at the numbers, the budget increase that have been realized since, more than $100 million in protected area budget was actually realized through this work. And if you look at the graph, it's still going up this year. The next example is from Zambia, looking more at the private sector. So again, the philosophy of this work is not to split up the public and private sector, but actually approach countries as a kind of national financial ecosystem that we want to align with the natural ecosystem. And so public and private solutions are both prominent in those finance plans. So this example is about green bonds in Zambia, which was a priority of the government. But there wasn't really a kind of general framework, and at the same time, the country had a very high sovereign debt. So the Sustainable Finance Working Group that BioFin supported first helped to develop the national framework, so to define how it works and what is eligible and what is not. But since a sovereign green bond looked very challenging because of the debt situation, they tried to focus more on corporate green bonds. And actually, several companies were quite interested to issue a green bond. And to encourage them, actually, the government adopted multiple tax breaks. So now if you issue a green bond or if you buy a green bond, actually you benefit from a tax break in Zambia. And following that, the first green bond was registered about 2 years ago for $200 million. And by now, $150 million has been, let's say, liquidated. I will also briefly mention some of the innovative finance work. So the Jaguar was already mentioned. So just recently, we launched the first Jaguar-related insurance in Misiones in Argentina, which is, again, a very good example of a public-private partnership because it's, of course, a private company that issues the insurance, but it's a local government, actually, who's the buyer. And the idea is that this can help to provide a compensation for human-wildlife-related conflict and prevent retaliatory killings. So just a few months ago, this was launched. And another example comes from the Philippines. Actually, all the other examples are from Philippines. They seem to be quite innovators. So they've started an auction of NFT art, which were donated by an artist and raised quite some funding with that last year. And the next one is one of my favorite ones, which is called Animal Town. So we call it, it's a gaming for good campaign. It's a good news for the lazy environmentalist, because from your couch, you can actually contribute to raise money for biodiversity. The most challenging part of this app was not to create the app, which there are companies who can do it, but actually how to channel the finance flow, which is now going to the Forest Foundation of Philippines. And so if you play this app and you buy any in-app purchase, or if you watch an ad, the money will go to conservation in Philippines. So just showing some of the innovative stuff that countries did. And the last one, again, comes from the Philippines as well. It's connected to a fintech company, an electronic wallet called GCash. And here, if you download a second app, G-Forest, it's connected to your payments. If you buy any organic product, green electricity, and so on, a tree starts to grow in the second app. When it's fully grown, a real tree is actually a plant somewhere in the Philippines. By now, we have more than 3 million trees planted, and this is done in cooperation with WWF, who are working on the tree planting part at national level. So this is more on the resource mobilization side. I think I will briefly touch also on the realignment, which, as I mentioned in the beginning, is just as an important part of the framework as the resource mobilization. So we found actually in the first generation of those finance plans that not many countries chose to work on this, even though they're all doing that scan that I mentioned, which they need to do now by 2025 for target 18. And so we developed additional guidance called the nature of subsidies to provide more kind of granular guidance. And it comes really, of course, I cannot really elaborate very much, but it comes down to basically a three-step process where you do the screening, where you then work on a repurposing plan of prioritized subsidies and then, of course, support this repurposing. But just to highlight that more than 100 countries have at least done this preliminary invention of harmful subsidies. And we're very much emphasizing also scenarios. So I think a lot of the discussion around this topic is about phasing out. And we found that this discussion on subsidies is both quantitative and qualitative. So we have to look very much also at the impact. But the first type of scenario, of course, we could follow is phasing out the subsidy, or the second one is reducing it and also reducing the negative impact. But the last two options seem to be the most promising so far. It's greening and repurposing. So in greening, we change not the objective, but we change the selection and exclusion criteria. And repurposing, we change the objective into something better for nature, like, for example, organic products. So I'm going to share quickly some examples. So the first one is from Colombia, where this analysis that I mentioned was done a few years ago, so now they're quite ahead. And there's a national credit mechanism called Finagro, who is a kind of lender of lenders. And they actually realized through GS-based data that their credits are potentially actually contributing to deforestation. They got quite concerned and they started to green the crediting system. So again, I'm not going to go into detail, but they prioritize 6 value chains that they want to focus on first. And they worked on greening those, and those are being piloted actually from this year. They're still waiting for the final approval, but it would present an amount of around almost $2 billion. But ultimately, they really want to green all of their credits, and that would present an amount of around almost $10 billion per year. So it really goes to show that they are actually in the greening of subsidies. There are a lot of opportunities for countries that are perhaps politically, more realistic than basically entirely canceling subsidies. The next example comes from Ecuador, and again, it's a kind of, I think I can best describe it as it's called CONAFIPS. It's a kind of lender, like a secondary lender. And here, again, they helped to develop a green credit program, and the first tranche had around $108 million. And this was liquidated rather quickly, and it's mainly for small and medium enterprises, for smallholders. These are mainly small-scale credits that are done through intermediate banks. And the second tranche, they're making available more than $800 million in credits. And in particular, of course, women-led households can benefit from this credits. And of course, again, it goes to show that this is a one-time mechanism, but there's a lot of potential to continue doing that or scaling it up in the future. Last example comes from Thailand, where they did, again, the same study. And they found that actually there was a negative impact from the construction of seawalls. And the cabinet then decided to break them down. And I think, strictly speaking, we would not probably call this a subsidy, but we are trying really to look more at the impact side rather than what's a subsidy. Of course, we do provide guidance on that. And around $7.6 million of negative spending has been reversed. And now the idea is to let nature-based coastal defense system come back, and we see the first nature already coming back. But more promising is even that the government is now sort of revisiting this policy of building such seawalls and may want to actually phase them out entirely. So those are some of the examples from our work. And I just want to highlight on this work for subsidies, and a very important finding that we have. We notice that countries, of course, see this as politically very sensitive. But if you provide an earmarked contribution, say, okay, you can work on this, and then you can receive this contribution, or maybe you do not want to work, then you don't receive this contribution. That actually really worked. And I do want to highlight again, of course, these are the examples of the countries, right? It's the work that we're just supporting. And these are examples from the countries that have really shown, I think, international leadership in green finance. So some of the things they work on now is then trying to mobilize more funding for this work on subsidies, but also being very aware that we have now, we're going to have soon more than 130 biodiversity finance plans. And so we want to help those countries to make sure they can also implement them. And thematically, our top priorities are integrating better climate and nature finance. So we're developing a module on how you can develop solutions that really have climate and biodiversity goals as explicit. So not sort of based on assumptions, but really make both of the objective of these solutions. And finally, on the private sector side, we are working on different mechanisms. Of course, the TNFD, I think, I hope is known to people here. But we're also working on a mechanism called the Nature Investment Facility, where we really put the enabling environment as a kind of centerpiece of work, similar to the example that I shared earlier in Zambia. So those are some of the examples of the work done through BioFin. And again, I just want to highlight that this is implemented in a very much integrated manner by one team at the global level and national level, and the whole structure is fully integrated. And we really appreciate a lot the support from the GEF that was provided, and from all of you to give countries really the opportunity to fill the finance gap. So thank you very much for that.
Thanks to you, Ono. And I will give the floor to Sonja so she can react for a few minutes before opening the floor. But I just want to make you a question, Ono. I mean, definitely there is a lot of progress in the original generation of biofilm countries, the first generation of biofilm countries. You showed some of the data. I wonder why, if these countries are doing progress in understanding that it is in their own self-interest to mobilize domestic resources more efficiently, and they had a plan where they have a set of innovative financial mechanisms, why do they still go to the COPs, those same countries, those same biofilm countries, go to the COPs and condition nature action to more funding for more ODA? What is your impression about that? Because I see this as a huge contradiction. We're doing a major investment to comply with the mandate and the decision of the COP, which is mobilizing resources from all sources, but seems like we continue to have many different gaps. You know, Kong Kong yesterday gave us her testimony. She's the CBD negotiator, and she's the GEF focal point. And when she was in Cali, she was like me, totally surprised by the fact that we've been able to mobilize $2.4 billion in 2 years for the implementation of GBF, and seems like no recipient countries felt, know, or responded to that. And that is why biofilm is so important for this organization. So before passing it over to Sonja, I wanted to bring kind of a complex, difficult question to your attention, and that is why it is so relevant to be to have you over here and to be super close to the process that we are totally committed to participate, which is the biofilm initiative.
Thank you so much, Carlos Manuel, for this very important question. Of course, I was myself also participating in those COPs with the similar questions, and I think the answer, of course, lies with the countries themselves. But I think a few things that I can say about it is, first of all, a lot of the results are still quite new. We have to admit that this takes long. In particular, the work on subsidies. If I would have come here 1 year ago, those results would not have been here yet. That's one thing, and probably we should share them more in these platforms. Second, also, I think that so far, if you look at those finance plans, maybe countries have received support to implement, let's say, 3 or 4 of the solutions, and not all of them. Could be also part of the reasons. But I think a really important reason actually is also that when we set up biofilm at national level, the most important stakeholder that we wanted to engage with was really to bring the Ministry of Finance on board and other finance stakeholders. And I think that has, in most countries, worked. In some countries, the team is actually sitting at the Ministry of Finance, and in others, it's not. But I think once that was done, perhaps there hasn't been a concerted effort to then look back to CBD focal points, making sure they're fully briefed. And I think this is one sort of action point from our side that we can do more about, is to really make sure that in countries there's no disconnect between the biofin process and also the CBD process. That I think for a while we didn't make that effort because we thought, okay, we just want to try something new, and this is really about national level. But I think now, in particular, because also the biodiversity finance plans, the design and implementation became part of the GBF under Target 19B. I think now sort of the circle is round, and we have to engage much more with the CBD focal points to make sure that they're very aware of this work and take this with them to the COPs. So,
thank you so much for your opinion on my question. I fully agree with you that we have to continue strengthening that collaboration and complementarities at that level. It's not just the biofin team with the CBD team. Is the biofin team, CBD team, and GEF operation focal point. And with that, we can be able to move forward in a much more positive manner the COP discussions on resource mobilization. Thank you so much. I'll pass it over to Sonja, who will react and complement to what Ono just presented before opening the floor to council members. Sonja, please.
Thank you, Carlos Manuel, and thank you, Ono, for the presentation. So just as a bit of more of a bigger picture context setting, as we heard this morning, and we hear frequently through so many COPs and through so many negotiations, resource mobilization is a topic that's on everybody's minds. I mean, how do we narrow the environmental financing gap? Well, we can do two simultaneous actions. Of course, we need to fundraise for the environment. And the usual suspects are, ODA from donor countries. And we also hear a lot about mobilizing resources from all sources, private sector philanthropy. And at the same time, we need to reduce the need for those resources. And we do that through policy coherence, which is included included subsidy reform, but not limited to subsidy reform. And the GEF, at the GEF, we dedicatedly tick all of these boxes. So on the one hand, we help to mobilize resources towards the environment through ODA. Of course, we've just started our GEF 9 replenishment process through using ODA to grow our agendas with private sector and philanthropy, and through efficiently using ODA to maximize impact, for example, through integrated approaches. And on the other side, we use ODA at the operational level to generate policy coherence. And as you know, this is an agenda that the GEF has been working on explicitly throughout GEF 8 with your support, and we'll continue to intensify that agenda through GEF 9. So biofin is a good example of this kind of initiative. Biofin is one example, and we have several others through the GEF portfolio, dedicated projects and programs, as well as the mainstreaming of these principles into existing projects and programs. So this is why we have invited Ono to speak with you today, because biofin stands as a good and tangible example of how your ODA to the GEF can translate into on-the-ground practical action in closing the environmental financing gap. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sonja. And with this, I would like to open the floor to council members for any questions, comments, or reactions to the presentation that Ono did on biofin. As we normally do it, Noemi will manage the list of speakers. Noemi, over to you.
Many thanks, Chair. I see that Andre has requested the floor, followed by Lauren. Andre, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this presentation, Ono, and also to the GEF Secretariat for having a dedicated slot on biofin in this council meeting. Biofin is a long-standing program. Donors, including Switzerland, together with UNDP, initiated it more than 10 years ago. And more recently, the GEF support, the GEF umbrella program approved in GEF 8, has been instrumental in scaling up and expanding coverage from just 41 countries to 133 today. We support GEF's active engagement with biofin, including as a contributor, like, for example, at the 6th Global Biofin Conference in May in Santiago, where the GEF representative joined the meeting of the biofin steering committee. Biofin has proven very successful at mobilizing domestic, public, and private funding for biodiversity and driving the integration of biodiversity across policies and institutions. And we believe it can serve as a model to also effectively address plastic pollution and mobilize domestic and private funding for the implementation of a plastic treaty that will hopefully be finalized and adopted later this year. A similar program could be supported by the financial mechanism of the plastic treaty operated by the GEF, like Finnish plastic pollution, PlastFin.
Many thanks, Andre. I'll now give the floor to Lauren, followed by Nicholas. Lauren, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ono, for the presentation and the results shown that are really innovative. And Norway, like Switzerland, has been a supporter of biofin since the start, and we're very happy to see these results and great that you could share them also with the Council. And we recognize the importance of biofin for Target 18, which you mentioned, harmful subsidies, but also Target 19, and specifically the part on domestic resource mobilization. And we support the GEF's continued work on supporting biofin, and especially focusing on implementing the financial strategy, the financial plans. We would also like to encourage the GEF Secretariat to look into the use of the National Alliance of Stakeholders and also the steering committees, because this, I think, could be a good inspiration for GEF 9 and the proposed, approaches on whole of society and whole of government. And then I just have a question to you, Ono. Do you have any reflections on how GEF in its next period could work in a more integrated way with biofin, not just in terms of receiving, financial support from the GEF, but also working in the countries and more integrated? For example, maybe the GEF could scale up some of the innovative financial solutions that you have, or if you have any reflections on that, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Lauren. I'll now give the floor to Nicholas, followed by Joao. Nicholas, first.
Thank you, Noemi, and thank you, Ono, for this very, very informative presentation. We absolutely appreciate the significant contributions of biofin to the global biodiversity finance agenda, and we welcome very much the opportunity to discuss the GEF's future engagement at this council meeting. And in this regard, I want also to echo Andre's appreciation with regards to GEF's support in the past. Germany is also proud to be a strong partner and strong supporter of biofin from the very beginning. And we see biofin as a key instrument to support countries in meeting their biodiversity finance targets under the GBF and in developing and implementing biodiversity finance plans specifically. The first phase of the Global Biodiversity Finance Program has laid a strong foundation with over 90 countries that have joined the family and begun to develop their biodiversity finance plan. And this expansion demonstrates the global appetite and readiness for integrated biodiversity finance, both to mobilize additional resources and to advance critical subsidy reforms and financial realignments. Biofin's whole-of-government approach clearly aligns with the GEF's strategic objectives to mobilize and align finance from all sources to biodiversity protection, and we believe strongly that GEF 9 can play a pivotal role in closing the biodiversity finance gap by building on the results and lessons learned through biofin. This is why we strongly support the continuation of GEF's investment in the implementation of biodiversity finance plans. And we recommend that the next phase of biofin should focus on first, strengthening country ownership and capacity for implementation. Second, the integration of biodiversity finance plans into national policy, as well as fiscal and economic frameworks to ensure biodiversity mainstreaming. And this is, in our opinion, essential to ensure that biodiversity finance plans do not remain isolated, but are integrated into all relevant policies. And third, mobilizing additional finance including private sector and blended finance instruments to achieve transformative impacts. So having said this, Germany remains very much committed to supporting BioFin, and we look very much forward to collaborating with the GEF Secretariat and fellow council members to scale up biodiversity finance globally. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. Next in line should be Joao, followed by Ben. Joao, floor is yours.
Thank you, Noemi, and thank you also, Ono, for this very informative presentation on such an important issue. We commend BioFin's support in helping 92 countries develop national biodiversity finance plans, which serve as strategic tools for aligning financial flows with the objectives of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. These plans recognize that COP16 in Colombia as key enabling activities are helping to close the estimated 700 billion global diversity finance gap. A powerful example of BioFin's impact was shared here today in Colombia, a member of our constituency. In collaboration with the Fund for the Financing of the Agricultural Sector, FINAGRO, and with support from UNDP and BioFin, Colombia is advancing ecosystem-conscious credit mechanisms for key value chains such as cattle, cocoa, coffee, rice, cassava, and non-timber forest products, as we saw here earlier. This is a clear example of a pathway to redirect financial instruments that may currently be harmful to biodiversity, in line with Target 18 of KM-GBF. Other example in this context, Ecuador is boosting a bioeconomy policy that will allow the country to build a more sustainable economy based on innovation and circularity. Therefore, BioFin has played an important role by developing and implementing financial solutions that tackle strategic processes, instruments, and initiatives on this matter. Looking ahead, we encourage the GEF, UNDP, and partners to provide continued and expanded support to countries that are already advancing biodiversity finance reform. Today, we saw the example of 6 value chains in Colombia, but additional support is needed to expand this approach to the remaining 32 value chains identified. Sustained engagement is crucial to moving from planning to implementation at scale, and to ensuring that the progress achieved so far translates into lasting system-wide transformation. These countries can also serve as models for replication across other regions and sectors. Thank you.
Many thanks, Joao, for that intervention. We'll now continue with Ben, followed by Rosanna. Ben, floor is yours.
Yeah, just to say many thanks for this this very detailed presentation. It's really useful to see such detail and drilling down into some of the detail of GEF's support. I mean, that is really valuable to see this in such a council meeting. I mean, basically a demonstration of where GEF's support is adding value, and we very much strongly support GEF's engagement. I do obviously realise from what you're saying, and also interventions which have come before me, that there's significant investment from many others in this, and also obviously the initiative is based on in UNDP. However, just a small point, just building on the visibility session we had yesterday from Robert, and I'm not sure exactly clear, maybe you mentioned at the start, GEF's engagement in this, whether it's so clearly understood and whether people do understand that. For example, when this message is communicated more broadly. So for example, I saw within the slides you presented, it had sort of BioFin and UNDP logos at the top, but I didn't see GEF anywhere in there. Many thanks.
Many thanks, Ben. I'll now give the floor to Rosanna, and then we'll come back maybe to some reactions. Rosanna, floor is yours.
Thank you, Noemi. Thank you very much for the presentation. I also would like to refer to a project financed by Global Environmental Facility. The achievement of biodiversity conservation and sustainable use targets such as those articulated in the Convention on Biological Diversity and especially Kunming Memorial GBF is hampered by the systemic lack of investment from all sources of funding. And Armenia is among the 91 participating countries of the Global Biofin Initiative, endorsed and being funded by the GEF. The primary goal of this project is to address the current financial deficit faced by nature by creating enable conditions at the country level. This project will support countries to narrow this gap between the finance available for biodiversity conservation, restoration, and mainstreaming, and the finance needed to meet stated biodiversity goals and targets. Biofin program offers a systematic approach that includes a comprehensive assessment of the national policy and institutional context, a detailed review of biodiversity-related expenditure, and an estimation of financial needs for achieving national biodiversity targets. By identifying gaps and opportunities in the financing landscape, Biofin supports countries in mobilizing additional resources, boosting the efficiency of existing funds, and exploring innovative financing solutions through enhanced coordination and capacity among national stakeholders. This initiative strengthens national efforts toward achieving global biodiversity goals, and the project objective is also to develop national biodiversity finance plans by identifying the root causes of biodiversity loss. And this systematic and replicable approach can increase the awareness of key stakeholders about the biodiversity finance, raise their motivation for collaborative action to address these issues, and provide the necessary methodological guidance and technical assistance to enable the process of analysis, consultation, and planning to proceed in each target country. It will facilitate the establishment of biodiversity finance discussion and coordination mechanisms in support of the participatory national analysis and planning. Thank you.
Many thanks, Rosanna and everyone. I don't see anyone else requesting the floor, neither here in the Preston nor online. So that will conclude the list of participants for this agenda item. And back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Noemi. Thanks, everyone, for their comments or questions. I'll pass it over to Ono to see if he has reactions to the comments, observation, and questions from the Council.
Thank you. I'll start with, I think, linkage to GF programming that was mentioned, which I think that because Biofin is implemented through the UNDP country office, I think that's actually where we saw among different initiatives, actually so far, really good linkages in many countries, all the way back from the phase one. But at the same time, I think we have to probably provide more guidance to do this in a more systemic way, to really, in particular, make sure that there's no synergy that remains unexplored with the GF. And I think under plastics, so I just want to, of course, it's not up to us, but I think that I just want to highlight that this approach that we have under Biofin, it can be applied to any topic in a way. But you just have to develop a series of dedicated tools that are specialized to this topic. But I think the more universal approach of having all the alliance of stakeholders, building on national teams, and so on, this can be applied to any topic. I also noticed the comment on the logos, and just to highlight, I mean, I think not so important to go back, but many of the slides had actually the GF logo. But I just want to highlight what is our policy actually on the Biofin. Really to show all the logos of all partners in all products. So we will show the GF logo in all of because we have this integrated approach. So we will show the GF logo in everything that Biofin is doing, unless you're telling me not to do that, of course. But that's normally the approach that we have for Biofin. And then I think that, it was also really important, and thanks to the comments from Brazil, who understood very well the work done as well. I think that indeed, if you look at the work that's going on, for example, in Colombia, it was rightfully mentioned, yes, this is already a very promising start, but actually more work will be needed, and we should not stop here. So it's a very important point that all this kind of work, it needs kind of not a project approach, but really like a portfolio approach, as we like to call it in UNDP, where basically the team is available day in, day out, year in, year out to help. And when they have some biodiversity finance issue, who are you going to call? Well, at least you can call the BIFIN, the biodiversity finance team. That's always there embedded in government. But also, indeed, a lot of additional support is needed. And that doesn't have to come only, of course, from the BIFIN team itself. When you go to implementation, hopefully many other stakeholders are also integrated there, including GEF accredited agencies. For example, on the subsidies, we have a great coordination with Conservation International that is also starting to work on that. And we very closely coordinate lessons learned because it's such a politically sensitive topic. I think otherwise, I would say back to the issue of visibility. We consider this is an area where we have to put more effort and more put more effort to think how we can in particular also highlight the prominence of the GF support within our work, which goes beyond, of course, logos. So it's something that we are trying to do, and we are very open for any feedback and guidance from you on how to do that better in the future.
Thank you so much, Ono, for your response. Let me react a little bit on my side. It is much more than putting the logo of the GEF in the web page or in any document or a PowerPoint presentation. It has to do with political communication and political strategy, because I'm still feel the pain of what happened in Cali. We are supporting big time through the GEF, Biodiversity Focal Area Trust Fund, recipient countries. We're supporting recipient countries with these innovative, high-quality projects of the GBFF, and we are being evaluated at the same time by the CBD Secretariat, indicating that the GEF is fit for purpose to deliver in the context of the convention. Nevertheless, recipient countries in the COP didn't stop complaining about the GEF. Complaining about the GEF in terms of not fit for purpose, inefficient, and bureaucratic. And there's not a single evidence in any formal documents that indicates that. So what we have in front of us is a major political challenge associated to elements that we understand. We understand that at the country level, in recipient countries, there's not that much of a coordinated effort within many actors and stakeholders from the government sectors that are relevant and important. It's not just the CBD focal point, it's the BioFin team, the GEF operational focal point, and many others. In our aspiration to really help countries implement GBFF and avoid ideological and discussions, particularly in finance, that are not based on evidence and data, I think that what we can do is do more than putting logo, is putting our communication teams to work on political communication, to work on political strategy under our supervision. That political communication, political strategy should be focused in helping countries be much more, recipient countries, much more consistent and coherent, as we had a big issue in CBD. I never seen what we saw in COP16 in Cali, that we didn't finish our work, and we had to go through an extended COP. So my call is to really work closer together with our communication teams and other experts from our organizations to be able to provide information and be able to engage much more at the country level within the different teams. Yeah, we in Costa Rica, it was very funny. The guys from the Ministry of Finance empowered much more than the Ministry of Environment on that. And yes, that probably brought then the gap within different stakeholders that are relevant in the international negotiations. So I just wanted to put my 5 cents on this one. Looking forward to going that direction. Yes or no?
Yeah, just very briefly, I think that's very well noted, and we're going to do a bit of our homework to see what's the best approach. I think this indeed goes beyond logos. I just want to highlight again as well that as a let's say now, user experience of working with the GEF, actually it has been very flexible to set up this program. And as an example, we had, for example, one country who couldn't send a letter on time, and even after half a year, after the deadline, they came with the letter, and they were still, there was no problem at all to join. And I think even, now the few remaining countries are still, I understand, eligible to join. So I do think there's indeed some kind of perception issue that we can actually help to address. Maybe we haven't done as much as we could, and there's definitely more that we can do. And we will come with it like a dedicated strategy to contribute that, centered in particular also around working with CBD focal points that have maybe been neglected in the past.
Thanks for that, Ono. And I strongly believe that these are emerging challenges associated to the core of what we do. And we all together can overcome them and be able to help recipient countries in their efforts to fully implement their NBSAP. So with this, we finish this agenda item. Once more, Ono, we're delighted and very honored to have you here at the GEF. The GEF, and I think that I can talk on behalf of the Council. The GEF is extremely happy, extremely excited, looking forward to continue engage with Biofin and making this a groundswell movement. It is a groundswell movement at this point at the global level in terms of one of the most important elements. My final observation is that we need to have some kind of tracking mechanism and publish the information of that on how countries are narrowing their domestic gap. And I think that you brought some good examples of countries who are doing precisely that. And I think that can be a very good way to move towards this realm of political communication. So with this, and by the fact that there is no, I got Joko, please.
Sorry, there was a mistake. I'm sorry.
So there is no decision to be taken on this agenda item. So I thank you, Ono, for your presentation. And with this, we conclude our agenda item. I'll pass it over to the Secretary of the Council for some announcement that she has for us.
Thank you, Chair. So as we all know, and certainly our bellies know, it's 12:30. So it's time for lunch. So we will break now for lunch. We will have a 1 hour lunch coming back at 1:30. The IEO has agreed to start the afternoon with agenda item 8, and then to conclude everything today in the afternoon to be very efficient also in our side. So the lunch will be held in the atrium. So that's where the reception was last night. So you just go out to the right all the way to the end. Council members and alternates are invited to a private lunch with the representatives of the multilateral environmental agreements here today. So that will be held as you go out down the stairs, and then to the left you will see the GEF banner there. So everyone, council members and alternates are welcome to go to that lunch. See you at 1:30.